Chapter 26. Tony Stark held his right hand and let out a howl like a pig. Oh! God! Who can tell me what's going on? Tony Stark's incredulous voice echoed in the house. Yi-Han also looked dumbfounded at Tony Stark, who was holding his hand on the ground and screaming. What's wrong with this Nima? Iron Man was beaten by a 6-year-old girl, and she was beaten very badly. Yi-Han looked at Tony Stark, who was screaming on the ground incredulously. As for the heartless Cai Wenji next to him looking at Tony Stark howling on the ground, he curled his lips and said, "What a useless guy, his body is so fragile." Tony Stark. At this moment, Tony himself couldn't believe the fact that he was beaten by a little girl. And he was still 6 or 7 years old. And it still broke directly. Looking at this situation helplessly, Yi-Han felt that he had to find the system to ask about the specific situation, but the most urgent thing was to deal with the current situation. Yi-Han helped Tony Stark, who was screaming on the ground, up and asked, "How is it?" "It's okay, right?" Tony Stark looked at Cai Wenji with a cute face in horror, and then replied, "I guess my arm is broken, I'd better deal with it first." After speaking, Roar called Jarvis, asked him to contact his personal doctor, and then left with his arm again. Yi-Han looked at Tony Stark, who was so sad, and Cai Wenji, who had a dull look next to him, and shook his head involuntarily. Cai Wenji, who paid attention to Yi-Han's expression, also said weakly, "That guy is really too fragile, and he was injured in this way. I really can't blame me." Yi-Han listened to Wenji's head and touched Wenji's head and said, "It's none of your business, it's that guy who killed himself." At the same time, fortunately, the initial goodwill degree was 90%. It was me who was lying on the ground when I couldn't summon Wenji. With lingering fears, Yi-Han also called Roar out of the system and asked, "What is going on? Why is Cai Wenji so powerful?" At this time, the system also gave an explanation. Ordinary soldiers in the King's continent have 1 ton of power, 10 captains have 5 tons of power, centurions have 10 tons of power, and so on. As for Cai Wenji, because she was originally a hero, she had almost a ton of power when she was 5 years old. Now she is almost a ton and a half. Yi-Han couldn't help but wipe the cold sweat on his forehead. He looked at Cai Wenji, who was very petite and lovely, and thought, "Is this the legendary person who can't look like? By the way, can I know Wenji's body data and ability?" Yi-Han asked suspiciously. "Yes, you can view the data of your hero in your hero template." Yi-Han listened to the puzzle and opened the hero template, and then carefully checked Cai Wenji's data. Hero, Cai Wenji body strength, 1.5 tons. Hero attributes, Sonic Wave System, Magic System. Hero ability, Long Song Scene. After Cai Wenji is injured, he will counterattack the attacker with Sonic Waves, causing spell damage and reducing his movement speed by 90%. Hero skill, Hujile, Cai Wenji plays a sound wave in the specified direction. The sound wave will cause certain damage to the enemy he hears, and the same target will be affected multiple times. Thinking of innocence, Cai Wenji plays music to recover certain injuries for herself and the surrounding friendly heroes. Forget Worry Song, Cai Wenji's piano sound increases the defense power of the allies beside him, and the speed of the enemy forces within the range will be reduced to a certain extent, and at the same time, it will cause a certain amount of damage. It will directly feint to the weaker enemy. Yi-Han looked at Cai Wenji's data and felt speechless for a long time. Damn it! I am actually not as good as a 6 or 7-year-old girl, and I feel depressed when I think about it. Yi-Han thought sadly. The most important thing is that Cai Wenji's attack seems to be a sonic attack, and at the same time it can also play a role as a nanny. Yi-Han didn't dare to look down upon Cai Wenji in front of him at this moment. After all, this is an existence that can export milk, and there seem to be fewer threats to Cai Wenji in this world. After all, except for the kind of mentally powerful and inanimate creatures, Cai Wenji is basically very strong. However, if the opponent knows Cai Wenji's ability in advance, it will be more troublesome to prepare for it. After all, Cai Wenji's attack is a sonic attack, or it is very easy to be targeted. However, what Yi-Han values more is Cai Wenji's second skill, which can recover certain injuries. What can be restored to? Although Yi-Han was quite curious in his heart, he would not try to experiment by himself. But isn't there a very good subject in front of you? Yi-Han smiled and looked at Tony Stark. Chapter 27. Tony Stark, who just returned from treating his wounds, looked at Yi-han and stared at him with a white mouse's gaze, and then asked anxiously, "Hey, man! Can you not look at me like this? This will make me doubt you. Sexual orientation. And I admit that I look handsome, but this is not a reason for you to commit a crime." Yi-han heard the long story prepared by Tony Stark and interrupted helplessly, "I am not interested in your chrysanthemums. How many days does it take for you to get better?" Tony Stark shrugged helplessly and said, "It's almost like a week, my goodness. Are the little girls in your world so scary?" Yi-han said whispered, "This may be a special case. I have a method to quickly recover your injured arm. Would you like to try it?" Tony Stark, who had seen Yi-han's magical tricks, nodded in agreement. Seeing that the other party agreed so easily, Yi-han happily patted the very cooperative Tony Stark and said, "I like your situational awareness. Just sit here and don't move right away." After finishing talking, he said to Cai Wenji, who was already obsessed with watching TV, "Wenji, come and help this uncle treat his injured arm." And Tony Stark, who was originally sitting on the sofa, stood up in horror and said to Yi-han, "Oh my god! You can't treat me like this, man, don't you think I was injured badly enough?" Yi-han looked at Tony Stark with a frightened face and said helplessly, "Man, believe me. It will be okay." After speaking, he forced the frightened Tony Stark down. And Cai Wenji, who was called over, looked at Tony with a reluctant face and said unwillingly, "If it wasn't for my brother who asked me to treat you, I wouldn't plan to help you this strange shalai." Tony thought with a bitter expression, "But I was actually unhappy." However, as a scientist, he still has a lot of adventurous spirit, and he also wants to know how Cai Wenji treated himself. Cai Wenji directly summoned her own instrument and then sat down and began to play slowly. Tony Stark looked at Cai Wenji, who suddenly summoned a behemoth. His small heart couldn't help but twitched, but after a while, the originally fearful mood was instantly replaced by joy. Because he was surprised to find that his arm was slowly recovering, but soon Cai Wenji's first performance was over. But Tony said anxiously, "Can you come back a few more times? I feel like I have hurt my arm a few times." Yi-han asked Cai Wenji, who was standing on his instrument in confusion, "How many times can you play that piece of music just now?" Cai Wenji tilted her head and thought about it cutely and said, "It seems that I can talk about it 5 or 6 times, and then I'll rest for an hour." Yi-han listened to Cai Wenji's answer and continued, "Then how many more talks will you try?" When Cai Wenji traversed for the second time, Tony Stark stood up and shouted in surprise, "Haha! My wound is healed." After speaking, he broke the plaster on his right arm. "I am very happy to move my arms to regain a new life," looking at the cute and adorable Cai Wenji with an incredible face and said, "What a great ability! A severe fracture can be recovered in 3 minutes. It's amazing." Cai Wenji listened to Tony Stark's admiration, and raised her chin proudly with a proud expression. And Yi-han also probably learned about Cai Wenji's second ability to restore ability. A bone wound like Tony Stark can be healed by just playing 3 times. So if it is an ordinary knife injury, it should be solved once, if it is an internal injury, it should be twice, and it is estimated that there will be about 5 or 4 serious injuries. Yi-han also looked at the cute Cai Wenji with bright eyes, "That's a baby. The critical moment can be worth a life." With the same expression, Tony looked at Yi-han at the same time. At this moment, there was only one thought in their minds. That is, whoever touches my nurse will die. After all, this is a life-saving thing at a critical time. At this moment, the importance of Cai Wenji is self-evident, and after the wound healed, Tony Stark found another reason to open a party, so he went to another bar. At the same time, SHIELD headquarters Fury looked at the report that Tony had just handed in, and said to himself with a gloomy face, "I didn't expect this guy to run to Tony, and now Tony is obviously on his side. It's really a mystery. Unpredictable guy." And the report in at the moment Fury's hand is the information Yi-han told Tony, that is, the world will constantly appear the heroes of the King continent. But Fury also remembered that even without Tony himself, it seemed that he could not do anything. Yi-han was even more aggrieved. Now that he has received such news again, how can he not be anxious? You must know that there is a horrible existence in this cheating intelligence that can destroy the earth with a wave of hands. Although I don't know the authenticity of the intelligence, it does not affect his fear of Yi-han in the slightest. After all, Yi-han is the only stranger in the world who understands that he is about to descend on the earth, and he really doesn't dare to offend Yi-han too much. What if that guy doesn't want to start a group of rebels? Fury, who thinks this way, can only let the threat of Yi-Han stay at Tony Stark's house. Chapter 28. The bored Yi-Han opened the system panel and fell into silence, looking at the solitary 500 in the number of honor points. It seems that we have to find a way to do something. Yi-Han thought helplessly. So Yi-Han picked up his mobile phone and contacted Gwen, who left his number the day before yesterday. But if there is anything to do right now, I'd better pick up girls before talking about it. Anyway, there will be opportunities in the future. After the call was connected, Yi-Han asked tentatively, "That Gwen, are you free now? What happens when I have time? What happens when I don't have time?" Gwen's very playful voice came out on the phone. Yi-Han also joked, "If we are free, do we have a very interesting date? If we are not free, how about I come to you?" Listening to Yi-Han's shameless answer, Gwen smiled and replied, "I am at the gate of New York University of Science and Technology, if you can arrive within 10 minutes. I think I must be very free." After listening to Gwen's words, Yi-Han was a little worried and confirmed, "Are you sure you are at the gate of the university?" "Okay, and very sure. I turned left on the parked chair 10 meters from the entrance of the university." Yi-Han directly used Sling Ring to open the long-distance space portal. At this moment, Gwen, who was sitting on a parked chair with a smile and waiting for Yi-Han's reply, suddenly noticed a light circle next to him, and then was very surprised when a familiar person walked out of it. Yi-Han looked at Gwen with a look of astonishment triumphantly and smiled, "You promised me that if I arrive within 10 minutes, what would you like to do with me?" Gwen was surprised, holding his mouth with his hand, trying not to let himself scream. Obviously Gwen was also shocked at this moment. Seeing the sudden appearance of Yi-Han, Gwen quickly calmed down and said helplessly, "Okay. Okay. I wanted to embarrass you, but I am a little girl who is still embarrassed not to be a powerful superhero." Yi-Han listened and explained with a smile, "The so-called heroes are just more perverted perverts than ordinary people. So don't think too much." Gwen also nodded blankly, "I didn't expect you to admit that you are a pervert." Yi-Han. Yi-Han, who is understood as a pervert because of his habitual lines, can only eat his own hardship. But Yi-Han still fought back, "Then the invariable lady, can we go for a walk next?" Gwen tilted his head and thought about suggesting, "So amazing superhero, can you give me a very amazing dating experience?" Yi-Han said without thinking, "Definitely, as long as you don't get too shocked." After talking, Yi-Han reopened the space portal and dragged Gwen into the gate in the surprised eyes of passers-by. After a short while, he arrived at the Great Wall of China. Gwen looked at the world miracle Great Wall only in textbooks, and was incredibly surprised. Roar asked, "Are we crossing half of the earth in the blink of an eye?" "Just as you think, beautiful lady," Yi-Han said coolly from the side of his house. Then he asked, "How is it spectacular?" Gwen nodded in shock, "I really don't know how people completed such a huge building thousands of years ago." Yi-Han, the so-called Great Wall is piled up with bones, and the ancient times of China is not as simple as the textbooks say. You will know this later. Yi-Han wouldn't be naive to think that there is nothing terrifying about the Huaxia in the Marvel Universe, otherwise he would not qualify as one of the 5 overlords of Marvel. Now whether we want to climb the Great Wall, Gwen nodded after listening, and then began to observe this world miracle. Because the Great Wall was empty at the moment, Gwen screamed presumptuously in front, and at the same time marveled at the wisdom of the ancient Chinese people. Gwen, who was soon tired from climbing, also sat on the beacon tower of the Great Wall to rest. Yi-Han at the back did not rush to follow up, and then asked, "Now, shall we visit the pyramids in Egypt? Or go to the South Pole to see the Southern Lights?" Gwen said wearily, "I think we'd better go back and have a meal first." After listening to Yi-Han, he found that 3 hours had passed quietly. Yi-Han looked at the Lai Yang on his head and nodded in agreement. Then he took Gwen to reopen the space portal and returned to Tony Stark's villa. And shortly after Yi-Han left, a few people in ancient Taoist robes also rushed over. Looking at the empty beacon tower, a person who was obviously the leader said cruelly, "It seems that these Western magicians are coming. The more presumptuous. It's unexpectedly coming to the Great Wall Forbidden Land again. If Ancient One is here, it will definitely give Yi-Han's undaunted commendation. You must know that China, as the safest place in the world, has its own set of rules. Outsiders' ability cannot set foot on the Great Wall. This is one of the rules. Few people have dared to set foot here since the founding of the People's Republic of China. Because at the beginning of the founding of the People's Republic of China, the magician, or vampire, tried to set foot on the Great Wall in search of dragon blood. Even the bones of the people of the Holy See are still buried under the Great Wall. I have to say that Yi Han's luck is good. It just happened that the Asgardian who guarded the Great Wall fell into a certain degree of slack because the ability had not stepped into the Great Wall for too long, so Yi Han just escaped. Chapter 29. Yi Han, who took Gwen back to the Tony Stark villa, also directly said to the ubiquitous J.A.R.V.I.S, "Hurry up and prepare lunch for us." "Okay, sir. It is estimated that the lunch will be ready in 10 minutes. After speaking, J.A.R.V.I.S immediately disappeared. And Cai Wenji, who was watching the cat and mouse attentively, looked at Yi Han who came back suddenly and jumped into Yi Han's arms. Roar said, "Brother! Where have you been? I didn't bring Wenji." After hearing this, Yi Han touched Cai Wenji's head funny and said, "Brother is busy with something, why don't you take you with you next time? And if you watch TV at that time, brother didn't bother you." After listening to Cai Wenji's expression, he thought very seriously for a while and then said entangledly, "Then if Wenji is watching TV in the future, brother still don't call me. Yi Han. This Nima is a dog. The 90% favorability is not as strong as that of a TV, Yi Han thought with black lines on his face. However, looking innocent Cai Wenji, Yi Han also said to Cai Wenji in his arms, "Come and introduce to you. This is Sister Gwen, brother's friend." Cai Wenji, who was in Yi Han's arms, also said to Gwen very obediently, "Hello Sister Gwen. My name is Wenji, 5.5 years old this year." Although he was curious about Cai Wenji's origins, Gwen, who was cute by Wenji, also showed a smile, "Come on. Let Sister Gwen hug, okay?" Gwen smiled and opened his hand. Wenji leaped into Gwen's arms without even thinking about it, so that the lunch that Jarvan's prepared was quickly prepared. Yi Han and Gwen, who had been hungry for most of the day, also began to enjoy lunch, but the calm atmosphere was interrupted by a group of unexpected guests. At this time, Tony Stark brought Fury to the villa. Tony looked at Yi Han who was eating lunch heartlessly and said, "I hope the guy I brought will not affect your mood for lunch." Yi Han listened to it and wiped his mouth with the napkin next to him. "Do you think it will have an impact?" Then he looked directly at Fury. As for the two behind Fury, one is Natasha Romanoff, and the other Yi Han is probably Phil Coulson. Yi Han couldn't help but asked, "Speaking of S.H.I.E.L.D, what's the point for you to come to me?" Fury watched Yi Han's arrogant attitude and the blue veins on his forehead popped up, but when he realized that he was asking for something, he abruptly endured it. Then he said very kindly, "We are here mainly because of something we want to ask you for help." Then he took the document from Phil Coulson and handed it to Yi Han. Yi Han saw the indifferent and took the document, then glanced at the document and said capriciously, "Too many don't want to read it, you should explain it to me." Fury, who was stimulated by Yi Han's contemptuous attitude, also felt that he should go out and calm down. After all, he had never received such a frustration since he became the head of SHIELD. So Phil Coulson winked at Phil Coulson behind. Phil Coulson also sat down opposite Yi Han with a smile and explained, "This is how we found a hammer that fell from the sky in the western region the day before yesterday. Our scientists can't detect what the hammer is made of, and even if we have spent huge amounts of manpower and material resources and cannot move, so the purpose of our visit this time is to invite you to come and have a look." After listening to Yi Han, he also thought about whether he should lie down in this muddy water. Although this is a good opportunity to earn honor points, Yi Han is really not sure that he has beaten the Destroyer. After all, the Destroyers in comics and movies are too terrifying. After thinking about it for a while, Yi Han also nodded, "I don't know the specifics, but I can check with you tomorrow. You just need to tell me the address." Yi Han thinks that he should be able to make soy sauce in the past, if it is really not enough, just run by himself. Fury, who knew that Yi Han could teleport magic in space, smiled on his gloomy face and said, "In that case, then we will send someone there to pick you up tomorrow." After speaking, he left without any muddle, and when Natasha Romanoff, who went out behind, looked at Yi Han and Gwen with complicated expressions when he went out. And Gwen, who had been doing the background template next to him, asked the Fury group in confusion after seeing the group of Fury go out, "Who was that group just now?" "Yet. The head of a global organization is the kind of organization that maintains world peace." Yi Han explained for a while, pondering. After all, Gwen may have to follow himself in the future, and it doesn't matter if something is told to him. Although he didn't understand it very well, Gwen, who still felt tall, nodded and continued to ask. What does that woman have to do with you? I always feel that you have a story with him. Yi-han. Depend on. What a keen intuition. Is this the sixth sense of the legendary woman? Yi-han also made no secret, I used to stay in that girl's house for a while. Gwen jokingly asked, nothing happened to the two of you. Later I discovered that she came to Carrie Stark's house when she approached me with purpose. Yi-han explained. After listening to Gwen's nervousness, he let go a lot, and then took a pitying look at Yi-han. His eyes were like looking at a girl who had lost his footing. Yi-han was stared at by Gwen's weird eyes and said unnaturally, do you want me to take you home? At this moment, Gwen knew that Yi-han should have something to do, so he nodded and told Yi-han his home address. Yi-han also used space teleportation magic to send Gwen back to the door. Okay. You are at the door of your house, then I will say goodbye here. Yi-han said. After hearing this, Gwen quickly kissed Yi-han's forehead and said, this is a farewell kiss. That's it for today, bye. Then blushed and ran back home. Chapter 30. After Yi-han woke up at noon the next day, he simply brushed his teeth and washed his face and ran to Tony Stark's room, waking up Tony Stark who was still sleeping. When Tony Stark originally heard Yi-han ask him to go to the western region, Tony Stark refused. After all, that desolate place requires girls without girls, entertainment venues without entertainment venues, and even if you want to find someone to show off, go for an egg. Yi-han definitely knows Tony Stark's thoughts, but after Yi-han said there may be something you are interested in, Tony Stark didn't even think about putting on clothes. After all, Yi-han's mystery has penetrated into his heart, so Yi-han said that there are things that interest him in that place, so there must be. So there was no doubt that Tony Stark was dressed neatly, put on his portable steel armor, and came to the hall. Yi-han, who was sitting on the sofa, was also thinking about whether to call Cai Wenji. But thinking that Cai Wenji is still young and only an assistant, Yi-han didn't have the idea of taking Cai Wenji to the battlefield. After all, Yi-han really couldn't do it. Even if the opponent is a hero, it still cannot change the fact that they are a little girl. Tell Cai Wenji to watch TV at home, and recruit roarj.a.r.v.i.s to watch Cai Wenji at home. Yi-han saw that the preparation was complete and Iron Man opened the space door directly, and came to the place Phil Coulson said. And Phil Coulson, who had been waiting for most of the day at the place where Mjolnir landed, looked at the light gate that suddenly appeared. I was very pleasantly surprised and greeted him. Watching Yi-han, Phil Coulson, who came out of the space door, stepped forward and smiled and said, after waiting for you for a long time, I thought you would break the appointment. Regarding Phil Coulson's joke, Yi-han also said distressedly, I want to come too. But when I went for breakfast today, I helped my grandma cross the road and forgot the time. Tony, who was next to him, knew that Yi-han was at home because he slept so late, but he still resisted his urge to laugh and echoed next to him, indeed. I told him about this many times and let him it's okay not to cross the road with the old grandmother, but she won't change after repeated teaching. Phil Coulson listened to the explanation of the two, even though he was a good old man, the veins on his forehead couldn't help but shoot up. I can't find a better one if I make excuses. Do I need to go out for breakfast at Tony's house? Do you think I'm stupid? But Phil Coulson, who didn't think he could talk about this issue, still changed the subject. If this is the case, let's go in with me to see that hammer. After speaking, he led the way. Yi-han and Tony also followed with interest. Phil Coulson brought Yi-han and Tony to the so-called Mjolnir. Yi-han looked at Mjolnir on the ground and I couldn't help but ran up to try if I could pick it up. Reaching out to hold Mjolnir Yi-han and pulling hard, he found that Mjolnir hadn't moved at all. Yi-han, who had been mentally prepared for a long time, was not too disappointed. After all, Yi-han doesn't think he is a person of high moral character. And Yi-han felt that if he really picked up Mjolnir accidentally, it would be abnormal. Without feeling embarrassed at all, Yi-han explained faintly, this hammer does not come from our world, but from your own universe, which means that this is something alien. Regarding Yi-han's explanation, Tony Stark in the Cloud and Mist asked, then why did the alien throw this hammer on the earth? After thinking about it carefully, Yi-han realized that it seemed that he couldn't use the term alien to explain, after all, he was also an aboriginal inhabitant of the earth before. So Yi-han still explained, Do you know Norse mythology? This hammer is called Mjolnir. You can check the information for the rest. After finishing speaking, regardless of Phil Coulson's expression, he walked outside. Yihan, who walked to the door, suddenly stopped and said, "That's right. The owner of this hammer will come and pick it up in the next few days, so you can pick it up. Don't offend others. After all, they are princes." Yihan feels that he should kindly remind him, although he doesn't have a cold with Thor. But Yihan is afraid that the wings that his little butterfly accidentally incited will change the plot. If Thor was killed by S.H.I.E.L.'s agent when he sneaked over to get the hammer, then some play. After all, Yihan really didn't know what the consequences would be, so Yihan, who decided to follow the plot, reminded it. After Yihan went out, he went straight to the nearby town, and Tony was very interested in Mjolnir, so he stayed there. Yihan also thinks it doesn't matter, he won't have to pick up a girl with a light bulb. After arriving in the town, Yihan also walked towards the bar in the plot. If I'm right, Thor's unlucky boy should be here, Yihan thought uncertainly. After arriving at the bar, Yihan just glanced around and found a big white guy who was drunk. Yihan found that this guy was a little bit like Thor in the movie. So Yihan guessed that this guy should be Thor's hapless kid, so Yihan ran over and patted the big white guy on the shoulder. Chapter 31. Yihan asked, "Hey, are you looking for a hammer?" The big white man looked inexplicably. "What hammer?" Looking at the inexplicable white man, Yihan asked suspiciously, "Are you called Thor?" "Who told you that my name is Thor? Are you a yellow-skinned monkey looking for trouble?" Inexplicably, the white man said angrily. Yi looked at the other party and was obviously drunk. Yihan thought that he had made a mistake first, so he didn't plan to trouble him. But at this time the big white man on the opposite side was dead again. "Look at you, the yellow-skinned monkey, who is so thin and thin. If you want to show the uncle a striptease, maybe the uncle doesn't care." Yihan's face suddenly became cold when he heard it, and then replied very cooperatively, "Okay. Isn't it just a striptease? It will be soon." Then he directly drew out the cold muzzle of a pair of guns to the white man's forehead. Asked coldly, "Do you still need a striptease now?" The big white man who was originally drunk was also awakened by the cold feeling on his forehead, and he did not dare to doubt the authenticity of the gun when he looked at the strangely shaped gun in his hand. After all, he had only one life, and he didn't want to use his life to try the authenticity of the gun. So he said with a horrified face, "No need. I was drunk just now, can you let me go this time?" Yihan smiled evilly, "Don't you like to watch striptease? Now I will give you half a minute. If you can take off your clothes quickly, and then run out, the gun in my hand might let you go. If the time is not finished, don't blame me if you die." After hearing the skills he had learned in his life, the big white man quickly stripped off all his clothes, and then ran out shirtlessly very quickly. Looking at this situation, Yihan also admired, "Old driver. This speed of undressing is absolutely battle-tested." As for killing the opponent, Yihan also felt unnecessary. After all, he had misunderstood first, and the opponent was also drunk, so Yihan only punished the opponent a little. After the oolong incident caused by the wrong person, Yihan also looked at the whole bar again. After finding that there was no other figure with Thor, Yihan thought that he had remembered correctly, it shouldn't be. At this time where would Thor go if he didn't go to the bar for a sullen drink? After looking around in the small town, Yihan, who is unwilling to give up, found that the whole town seems to be just such a bar. There is no reason for him to find no one. Just when Yihan was anxious because he could not find anyone, the Nordic gods used the monitoring screen to go from Mjolnir to Loki, who was looking for his brother Thor. He was also very curious about Yihan. So Loki, who was thinking of conquering Yihan, also came to Earth through Bifrost. Then walked directly towards the location of Yihan. At this moment, Yihan is also feeling distressed because he didn't find Tony. In fact, what Yihan cares about is not Thor, a stubborn guy, but he can't cut into the whole plot if he can't find him, and it is obviously not a good thing for Yihan who lost the plot advantage. While Yihan was walking alone in the town, Loki, who was holding Yihan in his heart, finally saw Yihan who was on the street. So I ran over and blocked Yihan's road very desperately and said, "Hello, my name is Loki, the current Nordic king. Are you interested in becoming my spokesperson on the earth now?" Yihan seemed to feel good about himself and Loki asked helplessly, "Are you stupid?" Loki, who was originally full of confidence, turned dark when he heard it. The most annoying thing for Loki, who had been lacking in love since childhood, was that others looked down on him. An immortal in Yihan dared to look down on himself as a god king, which made Loki feel very angry. So he directly raised his scepter and asked angrily, "What right do you have to look down on me? Take your contempt to see death god." After speaking, he raised the wand in his hand angrily and hit it with a magic bullet. Yihan. Loki Yihan, who saw a disagreement and started to act, also felt very speechless. It's reasonable. Shouldn't you villains just lick a lot of nonsense, and then do it again? Yihan murmured speechlessly, but the movement under his feet was not slow at all, using a sliding step to avoid Loki's attack. Then he took out a pair of guns and brought Loki to a mess. I didn't even bother you, but you came to me first, Yihan thought angrily. However, Yihan's bullet did not hit Loki, but only broke his phantom. At this moment, Yihan also knows. It is estimated that what is in front of him should be just a duplication, and the real body should still be in the Nordic temple. However, Yihan also felt that it didn't matter. The Thulhu who relied on IQ like Loki didn't really persuade him. After all the conspiracies and tricks in front of absolute power are nothing more than paper tigers. At this moment, Loki of the Gods' Court was very angry after receiving the information returned by duplication. Looking at the Yihan in the mirror, Loki also gave the other party a death sentence, but knew that this was not an impulsive time, so Loki abruptly put up with the idea of going to the earth and killing Yihan immediately. Instead, he intends to let the destroyer take care of this ant by the way. At this moment, Yihan looked at Loki, who was just duplication, and fell silent. Do you want to go back to Kamartaj to learn magic? However, Yihan, who knows that good horses don't want to go back to the grass, gave up this tempting idea, and waited until he had summoned a few magician heroes to learn slowly. But the most urgent thing is to find Thor, the hapless boy. But if you can't find it, you can only wait and see. Chapter 32. Anyway, according to the plot tonight, Thor should sneak into Mjolnir's drop location, and he will just be there by himself. With this thought, Yihan returned to the place where Mjolnir landed. Tony Stark, who watched Yihan come back again, said with a smile, I knew there was nothing to go around here, now you believe it. Yihan just rolled his eyes when he heard it. Yihan really didn't want to pay attention to Tony Stark, the worm on the head guy. But Yihan looked at the busy Tony Stark and couldn't help but curiously asked, did you research something? Tony Stark shrugged his shoulders regretfully and looked at Mjolnir obsessively like a naked beauty. I have never seen such a metal. It is incredible that the weight can be calculated but the manpower cannot be lifted. Fall into a state of research. Yihan didn't bother too much when seeing Tony who was already in the research state. He walked out quietly, then strolled around idly, waiting quietly for Thor's coming. After a long period of boring waiting, Yihan finally saw a sneaky figure sneaking into Mjolnir in the dark. Yihan looked at the sneaky figure and finally heaved a sigh of relief. This guy is finally here. Yihan was really afraid that this guy would not follow the plot again and made himself wait for nothing. So Yihan came to Phil Coulson quietly. At the moment Phil Coulson also discovered Thor's intrusion through the thermal vision shift, but because he had received a warning from Yihan and did not order it, Hawkeye, who was hiding in the dark, did not attack either. Well, let's not disturb him and wait for a good show. Yihan looked at Phil Coulson's puzzled eyes and explained, with this guy's current mentality, he can't hold the hammer, so you don't have to worry about losing the hammer and you won't be able to make a difference. And Yihan looked with interest at Brother Hammer, who was very desperate because he couldn't hold the hammer after trying many times. It also expressed great sympathy. After all the power of an extremely powerful god suddenly disappeared. Such a contrast was originally desperate. But what is even more desperate is that it is even more desperate to see that one's own power is in front of him but can't get it back because of his incompetence. Therefore, Yihan still has great sympathy for Brother Hammer at this moment. However, Yihan still said that although he is very sympathetic, he still has nothing to do with him. And what Phil Coulson next to him is about to see is also telling the agent to kneel down next to Mjolnir because of despair, Thor, and take him down. And Thor, who was full of despair, did not resist, but let the agents drag him down like a body that lost his soul. Yihan asked Phil Coulson next to him suspiciously, what are you going to do with him? Phil Coulson listened and explained, I will report to the chief and he will decide. Yihan shrugged and asked, can I go and see that one? Okay. After Yihan came to the place where Thor was under pressure, Thor, who seemed to have lost his fighting spirit and desperately, quipped, "How do you feel, unwilling? As the Prince of Asgard, you are now a prisoner. The point of detention." Thor, who was originally full of despair, immediately asked with excitement, "Who the hell are you? Why do you know where I came from? Do you know how I can get back my own power? You don't need to know what I came from temporarily, but I can give you a little hint. If you want to be Thor again to regain your power, then let go of your so-called god pride. Be a real hero." Yihan said unpredictably. For Yihan so profound, anyway, take Thor, the IQ of the long muscles of the head is really incomprehensible. However, Yihan doesn't matter whether he understands or not. Anyway, his seeds have been planted, and he just needs to wait for the harvest at that time. After Yihan left, I was also very interested in what S.H.I.E.L.D would do with Thor, so I found Phil Coulson again and asked, "What are you going to do with Thor?" Phil Coulson heard embarrassedly and said, "We received the order from above to imprison him for life." Yihan. The speechless Yihan suddenly felt that he was playing a big game. Is this Nima different from the development of the plot? You imprison Thor for life, what about the following plot? How do I get the honor of Lao Tzu? Yihan thought helplessly. So he asked with a dark face, "Can you contact your brain-dead director?" "Yes." "What's the matter with your contact?" "Definitely is to ask why being a level 10 agent would do such a stupid thing." Yihan replied angrily, unabashedly despising fury in his tone. Phil Coulson also knew at this moment that his chief seemed to have done something great, so he took out his communicator and contacted Fury. Fury looked at the virtual screen and asked Yihan, "Are you looking for something to do with me?" Yihan heard angrily and said with a smile, "Fury, tell me honestly, are you AR?" Fury listened to suppress the anger in his heart and asked, "Why do you say that?" "Then I ask you. Did you imprison Thor for life?" "Yes." Yihan was speechless for Fury's decisive answer. "Do you know the origin of others?" Yihan asked uncertainly. Chapter 33. Isn't it an alien? Is that what you said? Fury said indifferently as if he didn't care much about Thor's origins. Then I will tell you the specific origins of this alien. He is the heir of Thor, the king of god Odin in Norse mythology. He sent his son to the earth to practice. You directly put his son in prison for life. You say, what are the consequences? Yihan asked amusedly. At this moment Fury also knows how stupid his solution is. Maybe this will trigger a war between two civilizations. If a war between two civilizations is caused by one's own mistakes, then one's own sin can be serious. Fury, who was in a cold sweat with fright, also knew how wrong his decision was. Fury, who has put the protection of the United States first throughout his life, is also struggling at this moment. Yihan looked at the entangled Fury and said indifferently, "Since they let his son come to the earth to experience, you should regard Thor as the visiting messenger of the Nordic gods. Then maybe people can come to the earth to help with the LN relationship." Yihan said that this person is true. After all, Thor is really half the earth many times in the plot. After Yihan's tricks, Fury was finally willing to let Thor go. Seeing Fury Yihan finally let go, he also breathed a sigh of relief. Damn! Is it easy for me to get honor points? How much tongue did I waste to correct this damn plot line? Yihan vomited helplessly. But seeing that the plot finally started to return to normal, what Yihan has to do now is to quietly wait for the destroyer to come. And Thor was released because of Yihan's blessing, and the plot is the same as the development in the movie. And Yihan, who has been observing secretly all day, finally waited for the Asgard 3 warriors. Yihan watched the arrival of the Asgard 3 warriors and knew that it was not far from the arrival of the destroyer, so Yihan, who had waited for so many days, was finally able to play. Yihan used the space portal to come directly to Thor and them. Looking at the portal that appeared suddenly, the Asgard 3 warriors were also very vigilant and prepared. Yihan looked at the vigilant Asgard 3 warriors after coming out of the space portal and explained helplessly, "Don't be so nervous, brother has no malice." Behind everyone's protection, Thor suddenly appeared. Yihan said in confusion, "Is it you? It seems that you are quite impressed with me." "That's right, it's me. Are you surprised?" Yihan said with a second grade. Thor looked at the guy in front of him who was obviously not normal and explained to the 3 Asgard warriors who stopped in front of him, "It's okay, everyone. The other party is not an enemy." Then he looked at Yihan and asked, then can you tell me what is the purpose of your sudden visit? Yi-Han looked at the sky far away unfathomably, then pointed to the 3 hapless children in front of Thor and said, I don't know if it's because of your 3 hapless ghosts coming to the earth, or if the 4 of you were originally unfortunately, so I guess the earth will be affected by you now. What earth will be affected by us? Make it clear, asked Sif, who was very upset with Yi-Han. That means Loki intends to kill the 4 of you. Definitely, the main thing is to kill Thor. The 3 of you may be incidental. In order to kill you, Loki sent the destroyer to the earth. So the earth is exhausted by you. Yi-Han explained with a smile. With a face full of disbelief, Thor said angrily, how is it possible? Why did he kill me? My heart is not balanced. What else can you do? You see it's already here. Yi-Han mainly pointed to the sky not far away. At this time, the destroyer was also sent to Earth by Bifrost, and then walked directly towards Thor's town. Thor, who still couldn't believe the destroyer who came by, had to admit this fact. So he said decisively, Sif, let's organize the people in the small town to retreat. Then he looked at Yi-Han and said in a begging tone, although your origins are mysterious. But I know you are definitely a strong man, so I want to ask, can you delay the destroyer for a while? After listening to Yi-Han, he also knew that Thor had a certain level of consciousness at this moment, and now that the destroyer had descended on the earth, it was time for him to go out and earn honor points. Just when Yi-Han was about to go out to make a wave of soy sauce, he suddenly triggered his first mission in this world. Task name, get the destroyer's fragments. Mission objective, get the destroyer's fragments and hand them over to the system. Quest reward, Chang'an City, one of the miracles of the magical mechanism. Elementary level version. If the previous Yi-Han was just for a wave of honor points, then the current Yi-Han is going to work hard. You must know the most basic background of the story as a King of Glory fan. As the city of miracles in the King's continent, Yi-Han would not believe it himself. Although it is only the elementary level version, the function is definitely a force. So Yi-Han intends to have a reward for fighting his old life. Because as long as you get this reward, Yi-Han's future plans can be fully implemented. At that time, I truly established a foothold in the Marvel world. So full of vitality, Yi-Han decided to persuade the destroyer, even if it costs huge amounts of. Chapter 34. At this time, Phil Coulson and the others also saw the destroyer coming, so they ran up to negotiate with the spirit of humanitarianism. That's right. Just run up to negotiate. Even if Yi-Han has already watched the movie, he really wants to continue to complain about this situation. I really don't know where the IQ of their agents is. Is such a big guy negotiable? And it's the kind that destroys it when he appears on the scene. So the result is similar to the most striking thing in the movie. The destroyer didn't even look at them, and fired when he didn't close it. After all, for a second god like Loki, he won't stop for a mortal. Knowing that it's useless to negotiate stupidly, Phil Coulson also directed the people around him to attack. But there is no use for eggs, just such a little attack left a trace on the destroyer, and the destroyer solved them directly with shockwave. And at this time Yi-Han also knew that it was time for him to perform. So slowly walked to the destroyer and put up a universal gesture. Hey! Loki, you guy who has been lacking in love since childhood, do you remember, brother? If you don't remember, then I will remind you that I was the last time. The person who accidentally killed your duplication. Through the destroyer's observation of the battlefield, Loki looked at Yi-Han's provocation, and remembered that this guy was the guy who killed his duplication not long ago. And the most hateful thing is that this guy actually provokes himself again. This is absolutely unbearable. Loki gave a wicked smile and stared at Yi-Han with a sullen look, before giving the destroyer an attack order. After receiving the instruction, the destroyer also shot a deadly shockwave towards Yi-Han. Yi-Han was instantly covered by this terrifying shockwave. Seeing that he solved the annoying guy Yi-Han so easily, Loki smiled triumphantly, stupid mortal. This is the consequence of delusion against God. When it comes to solving his own brother, he can solve it easily. I got this reptile Loki, but I am still in a good mood. Just when Loki was proud, a terrifying roar came out from the flames, and then a height of 5 or 6 meters, the whole body was densely covered with various lines, and the monstrous King Kong appeared in the sea of fire. After the transformation, Yi-Han felt the majestic power in his body, and instantly became extremely confident. Looking at this situation, Phil Coulson couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. After all, Yi-Han has a terrifying title in their entire S.H.I.E.L.D. or other organizations after their transformation, the strongest creature on the ground. It is unceremonious to say that the transformed Yi-Han is definitely the most powerful creature on Earth, even the Hulk is not his opponent. This matter has been verified. And for the transformed Yi-Han, he will be beaten directly, otherwise he won't have to fight at all. After all, Yi-Han will constantly become stronger because of his anger. Angrily Yi-Han looked at the destroyer in front of him, and at the same time put Loki far away in Asgard on the list of deaths in his heart. If it weren't for the blood of the demon seed in the body to take the initiative to transform when he was in fatal danger, then he would really have finished playing. After experiencing the crisis of death, Yi-Han is also extremely angry at the moment. This also caused his power to be 3 times that of the previous transformation. After transforming, Yi-Han directly roared, and then ran directly towards the destroyer. And Loki, who was still in a daze at the moment, quickly returned to his mind and ordered the destroyer to clean up the guy in front of him. Even after the transformation of Yi-Han, Loki still has the mentality of disdain. After all, what if it becomes bigger and ugly? It's not just an ant. Full of mystery and self-confidence, Loki did not hesitation and gave orders to make the destroyer arouse Yi-Han. Watching the approaching Yi-Han destroyer, the lethal shockwave fired again at Yi-Han. But for the transformed Yi-Han, such a shockwave doesn't hurt or itch when hitting him. It can't even stop him from moving forward. Not to mention hurting him. Yi-Han jumped up when he was only tens of meters away from the destroyer, raised his arms and slammed down at the destroyer. And the slow-moving destroyer directly chose to head with Yi-Han. The overwhelming destroyer was also directly beaten to the ground by Yi-Han's powerful force. This also resulted in severe shape-shifting of the destroyer's arms, and even a large swath of his chest was occasionally dropped. There was also a hint of panic in Loki's eyes looking at the destroyer with severely shape-shifting arms. Now he has to admit that he underestimated Yi-Han. He never expected that there would be such a fearful creature on such a backward planet. He swears that it is definitely the most powerful creature he has ever seen. Using a pure physical attack to smash the destroyer's arm into shape-shifting is absolutely terrifying. However, Loki quickly became calm, and reordered the destroyer whose arm had recovered to continue. For Loki, Yi-Han must die. Because not only Yi-Han's power made him feel terrified, even his mystery also made Loki sleepless. Looking at the destroyer who came up again, Yi-Han roared in excitement, and then continued to raise his fist and smashed it up. It was hard to find an opponent who could watch his punches. Yi-Han also wanted to punch more. Vent. The destroyer, who was not as powerful as Yi-Han, was smashed out again, slid on the ground for a full 7 or 8 meters before stopping, but immediately got up again casually. Continuing to walk towards Yi-Han, the destroyer who walked towards Yi-Han also fired a red light full of destruction again. This time Yi-Han also knew clearly that the light that struck him was definitely far more terrifying than the previous few times. Chapter 35. Knowing that he was moving slowly, Yi-Han directly raised his arms and crossed the block and arched his body slightly, trying to block the powerful rays. Soon, destructive rays hit Yi-Han's crossed arms, causing a large area of skin to be scorched, and even the smell of roasting meat filled the air. Yi-Han saw that although he blocked the destroyer's attack, a large piece of skin on his hands was also burnt, and there was even a burst of barbecue aroma, but Yi-Han didn't care too much. Because at this moment, his burnt skin is constantly falling off, and layers of new and harder skin are growing out. Although this wave of attacks from the destroyer could be blocked, the pain caused by being scorched by the destroyer's rays also made Yi-Han very angry. Strictly speaking, this is the first time I got injured after getting the system. Although it was not very serious, it also made Yi-Han feel very angry, which also caused his strength to double again. Yi-Han was so angry that he rushed directly to the destroyer. Yi-Han approached behind the destroyer, and violently grabbed the destroyer's arm directly. Then the destroyer's arm was directly torn off under Yi-Han's terrifying force. But the destroyer's recovery ability was more terrifying than Yi-Han's. The arm that had been torn out instantly grew back, and then hit Yi-Han's face with a heavy punch. Yi-Han, who was caught off guard, was directly knocked to the ground by him. At the same time, the destroyer kicked it again before Yi-Han didn't react. The heavy kick hit Yi-Han's abdomen directly, but he was lying on the ground and Yi-Han was not kicked out, but directly hugged the destroyer's foot. After Yi-Han hugged the destroyer's foot, he threw him out violently. Yi-Han also took advantage of this gap to get up. Jumped towards the destroyer who was thrown out, and then stepped heavily on the destroyer god, who fell on the ground. Then there was a scene where Yi-Han directly pressed the destroyer to fight, but because Yi-Han's attack was a purely physical attack, and his power did not reach the destroyer's limit. So no matter how he smashes it, the destroyer is like rubber. As long as Yi-Han stops for a day, the destroyer will constantly recover. Therefore, Yi-Han can only smash constantly, and the new anger of Yi-Han who keeps smashing is getting bigger and bigger. See if you die! See if you die! Yi-Han roared angrily in his heart, his strength getting stronger. At this moment, Thor looked at Yi-Han, who was constantly raising his fist and hitting the destroyer, and asked Phil Coulson next to him in surprise, "Is this your earth power? It's really amazing. If my power is restored, I really look forward to fighting him." Phil Coulson looked at the destroyer, who was crushed and beaten by Yi-Han, with a smile on his face. At least there are people on Earth who can deal with Asgard, even if the other person is not on Earth, he lives on Earth all the time. Thinking about this, Phil Coulson couldn't help but feel happy a lot. Just when everyone thought this was a war without suspense, an unexpected person suddenly came and brought a very bad news. "Everyone, I advise you not to be too happy. If this goes on, I can guarantee you, we will not be far from the destruction of the Earth." Professor X, who was pushed by the piano, appeared behind Phil Coulson and said. Phil Coulson listened to the voice coming from behind, turned his head in confusion and looked at Professor X, who was paralyzed with both feet, and asked, "Why do you say that?" Professor X's wise eyes fixed on Yi-Han, who was constantly beating the destroyer, and replied, "That little brother cannot last too long. If this continues, then it will become a monster. An irrational, better than the destroyer is even more terrifying monster." Phil Coulson was shocked when he heard it. You must know that if Yi-Han is not sensible, then it is truly terrifying. After all, the current weapons on the Earth may not kill Yi-Han. If the irrational Yi-Han is destroyed on the Earth, then some play. After thinking about it, the terrifying Phil Coulson asked in a panic, "Is there no way?" Professor X thought for a while and said entangledly, "Maybe I have a way. But if he is sober, who will deal with this monster?" After Professor X's words fell, the whole scene fell into silence again. Yes, now Yi-Han is their hope. If Yi-Han returns to normal, what will they do to deal with the destroyer? Everyone thought helplessly. The scene at this moment is undoubtedly entangled. If Yi-Han does not return to normal and continues to fight, he will definitely be demolished, and a more terrifying monster will appear at that time. But if Yi-Han returns to normal, who will deal with the destroyer? So this matter has fallen into this very embarrassing cycle. At this time, Thor had been silent and suddenly said solemnly, "Maybe I can solve this incident." After speaking, he looked at Professor X seriously. "Then you find a way to get that guy back to normal. Things started because of me, so let's stop because of me." Professor X looked at him with a serious look, although Thor didn't know who the other party was, but since he had a solution to this matter, this result was definitely the best. So Professor X also tried to contact Yi-Han, who was gradually losing his mind through telepathy. Chapter 36. Yi-Han, who was beating the destroyer madly, suddenly thought of a very reassuring voice, "Child. Can't force it, if you continue like this, you should know what the result will be." Yi-Han, who was hammering the destroyer's body frantically, paused when he heard the action in his hand. Yi-Han, who had become more irrational because of his anger, also came to his senses. At the same time, he also instantly remembered the damn aftermath of transformation. Knowing that if he continued like this, he would definitely become a beast, so Yi-Han also slowly stopped the movement in his hand. Then he picked up a system that was handed over to the destroyer fragments that had been continuously devastated. Yi-Han also directly kicked the destroyer away with a heavy kick. Then he returned to normal again. Yi-Han said that he was accidentally caught in anger just now, and now his task has been completed, whoever wants to wipe his butt. Thinking like this, Yi-Han came to Professor X and found it very strange to see the X-Men who suddenly entered. Why does Professor X appear here? Is it because of himself? Yi-Han was puzzled. However, Yi-Han at the moment also knows that now it is not entangled why Professor X and Jin are here, but thinking about how to solve the destroyer. Although I want to pat my butt and leave, I have to let myself go. Yi-Han pointed helplessly to the destructor who had climbed up in the distance and said, "What about that guy now? You know that no one of us can fight against that guy except me." Actually speaking, besides Yi-Han, Phoenix Piano can also solve the destroyer, but her shortcomings are as uncontrollable as Yi-Han, and the impact brought by Yi-Han's transformation is even worse. So Yi-Han also selectively ignored it. However, at this time, Brother Hammer ignored the obstruction of the Asgard 3 warriors, and his expression went towards destruction. For Brother Hammer, who has suddenly become taller, Yi-Han can only wish him sincerely, and hope that he will not let him prove that the latter sentence is gone forever. Thor came to the destroyer and said awe-inspiringly, "Loki, my brother. I know you want to kill me, so kill me. But I ask you not to continue to destroy the destroyer." And Loki, who controls the destroyer, smiled triumphantly, "My dear brother. Are you willing to give up your throne for this group of ants? What a foolishness." Thor, who is the younger brother, said deeply, "I never thought of competing with you for the throne. If you want, then you will inherit the throne." Who knows his attitude towards the throne is Loki's most annoying attitude. Why is the throne that you have tried so hard to get so worthless in your eyes? Loki, who was completely irritated by Thor's words, yelled out of control, "It's your dismissive tone. It's disgusting. You can rest assured that I will not only inherit the throne. I will also conquer the 9 kingdoms. Me will become the overlord of the world tree. And now I start my journey from this damn earth." After speaking, Thor was swatted out like a fly by the destroyer. Then he rolled a long way before stopping. And at this time, Jane watched Thor, who was shot flying out, and ran over anxiously, and then began to show affection regardless of the battlefield situation. So Loki, who is a single dog, was stimulated. "Damn, when you were in Asgard and Sif abused Loudza, who was a single dog in Asgard, it's okay for you to come to the earth and find a native girl of the earth to show affection in front of Loudza." Loki of the Soul of Awakening decides to kill the showy couple in front of him. So the manipulating destroyer walked up. Seeing the destroyer getting closer and closer to him, Thor also said anxiously, "Jane, leave here. Otherwise it's too late." Then there was a very nauseous exchange. Loki thinks everything will follow the script. Just when Nokia was doing "As long as I trampled this pair of dog men and women to death, and then inherited the throne by myself, and finally conquered the 9 kingdoms with invincibility. Dreaming of a sweet dream." With the sound of thunder, Brother Hammer made his debut. At the same time, he woke him up. Yi-Han watched the plot return to normal again and said to Professor X boringly, "Okay, there is nothing wrong with us now, so can you tell me why you came to me now?" Professor X smiled and said, "Go, let's talk on the plane." So Yi-Han and Professor X left in the messy eyes of everyone. That's right. Just left, just when things were most exciting, just left when Thor knocked Viagra to be awesome. As for Yi-Han's reason for leaving, it is also very simple. Now the honor points are earned, the soy sauce is also played, and the mission is completed. Why don't you leave and stay here? But what makes Yi-Han feel strange is why he didn't see Tony Stark in the whole battle. However, Yi-Han, who was very nervous, didn't care so much, but followed Professor X on their plane. After getting on the plane, Yi-Han looked at Phoenix, who was obviously much younger, and Professor X, whose hair had not fallen out. He also knew that this world should be the world after restarting time, and it was the time when the old monster of Apocalypse was not resurrected. But what made him more curious was, why did Professor X find him? Yi-Han can 100% guarantee that he does not have X gene in his body. Yi-Han asked suspiciously, "Now you can tell me the purpose of looking for me." Chapter 37. We are here for your purpose. Because we are all of the same kind, we want to invite you to join our school. Then guide you to a good path. Professor X said with a smile. Yi-Han was speechless for a while. What does it mean that I and them are of the same kind? There is no mutant gene in Lao Tzu, and even if he has the X gene in his body, Yi-Han will not go to the X Academy. Don't you see? Basically every movie, this hapless school, will suffer. The only time that the episode did not suffer has more mutants dead. So Yi-Han feels that whether it is before or after the restart time, he doesn't want to join X Academy. After all, he didn't want to sleep well and suddenly died. Sorry. I refuse. Yi-Han replied directly. Why? Qin asked suspiciously, obviously he didn't understand Yi-Han's rejection. Yi-Han explained, first, I'm not mutant. I don't think I need to prove it like this. Second, your thoughts do not match me. I am not the kind of person who likes to be beaten. Third, I think you are a group of unlucky people, don't want to be with you, unlucky. After listening to Yi-Han's explanation, Professor X and Phoenix are speechless. The first 2 points are okay, but what the hell is the latter two? Are we so unlucky? Yi-Han, who brought the expressions of the two to the present, said mysteriously, I have a few abilities. Foreseeing the future is one of my abilities, so I don't want to be burdened by you, so it's that simple. Both of them were very anxious after hearing Yi-Han's answer. They have a reason to let Yi-Han join their school. Because Professor X not only wanted mutant to live peacefully with humans, but also wanted mutant to have a place where he could not be blinded, so he created the Genius Youth Academy. Many high-level officials in this country are very opposed to the school he founded, but because of Professor X's contribution and deterrence, they can only agree. But even so, some senior executives still use mutant's idea in secret, and constantly hold mutant to experiment in secret. Even if Professor X knew the filth in the dark, he could only open one eye in pain because the opponent had a military background. So here I have to admire Professor X's psychological endurance ability. But just yesterday, Fury found him. The purpose is to let Yi-Han join the X Academy, so that this guy will not run around, and at the same time let Yi-Han always stand on the side of humans. And as a price, Fury can use the resources he has to help Mutant School and help fight against those organizations that secretly use Mutant to do experiments. For Fury's request, Professor X thought for a long time, and thought it was worthwhile to trade one mutant for the entire mutant's future. And it's not that Yi-Han's life is just to restrict his freedom, so that he doesn't want to cause trouble everywhere. So Professor X agreed to Fury's request, but when he turned on Yi-Han's brainwave scan, he discovered that this guy is not mutant at all. So this is so embarrassing. However, for mutant's future, Professor X also gave up his bottom line and wanted to use his power to change Yi-Han's memory so that he thought he was a mutant and a very kind mutant. But when he invaded Yi-Han's mind, he was squeezed out by the blood of Yi-Han's tyrannical demons. The most terrifying thing is that even his mind has been affected. If he hadn't quit in time, he would have become a tyrannical mutant. So after experiencing that incident, Professor X dare not invade Yi-Han's mind, and at the same time he also asked Roar to not invade Yi-Han's mind. After all, Jean is not herself. If she invades Yi-Han's mind, Dark Phoenix will come out in all likelihood. So because there is really no way, this scene appeared today. But now Yi-Han actually rejected them without even thinking about it, then there is something to play. After all, this guy Yi-Han turned into their mutant, except for the blackened violin, really no one can deal with him, even Magneto can't beat the crazy Yi-Han. Then how do you want to join us? Professor X almost begged. Yi-Han also heard a different taste from the middle, why do you have to join me? After all, I am not mutant. Professor X who couldn't help but had to tell the whole story. He definitely didn't dare to say that he definitely invaded Yi-Han's mind. After all, Professor X is not that stupid, he doesn't think he told him after he tried to invade the other person's heart. Yi-Han will communicate with them so kindly. After listening to the whole thing, Yi-Han cursed and said, this dead bald head is really going to do something for myself. However, Yi-Han did not join X school because he sympathized with them. I can't do anything about this anyway. Anyway, we have no reason to help you without relatives or reasons. Yi-Han was about to open the space portal and leave after speaking. Just when Yi-Han wanted to step into the space portal, the voice of the system came out of his mind. Chapter 38. Congratulations to the host for triggering the task. Task name, Save Mutant. Mission objective, give mutant a place to live, and subdue the mutant race. Mission reward, 1 million honor points. 2 attribute hero selection cards, what attribute heroes can be selected, 1 random item upgrade card. 1 random card with hero skin. Supreme weapon bloodline power x1 mission limit, none. Yi-Han was shocked by the sudden task at this moment, let alone the task, how rich the reward is. Yi-Han has only one idea at the moment, that is to kidnap all mutants, and then force all mutants to surrender. However, this thought came to the fore and was directly extinguished by Yi-Han. After all, he still doesn't want to die. Although he has a plug-in, he is still not stupid enough to be an enemy of mutant. So Yi-Han stopped and said to Professor X, if you want mutant to have a paradise life, then surrender to me. Maybe I can find such a place for you. Disappeared in the door of space. The reason why Yi-Han said this was just to plant a seed for the other party. After all, his current ability was not qualified to talk about it with mutant. What he has to do at the moment is to leave a seed to Professor X, one of the mutant leaders, a seed that can take root in the future. As long as the plan is successful, then it's another matter. At that time, I was basically 100% sure to complete the task. Yi-han thought lightly in his heart. Qin, who watched Yi-han disappear, said sadly, "Teacher, what should we do?" Professor X looked thoughtfully at Yi-han who left and replied, "Since the other party is unwilling, let's forget it, maybe this is our mutant's life. After all, we can't offend him too much, so we will provoke mutant at this time. One trouble is not good." After speaking, Professor X was silent, and Qin next to him only shook his head secretly, and went to control the plane to return to school. Yi-han returned to Tony Stark's villa using the space gate and asked directly, J.A.R.V.S, "Do you know what Tony is doing now?" The voice of J.A.R.V.S also came from the void. "Mr. One day ago, the boss received a message that the island you requested was found. He has already gone to London to arrange things. It is estimated that he will be back in 3 days." Yi-han was relieved when he heard that his own affairs had fallen behind. After all, the island of his next plan is the top priority. At this time, Yi-han also found out that Cai Wenji was not seen in the hall, and then asked anxiously, "What about Wenji's girl?" Mr. Wenji went shopping with Miss Pibo because she felt too boring, and she will be back in 2 hours. After Yi-han listened to J.A.R.V.I.S explanation, he was not entangled in this matter. Instead, he opened the system panel and looked at his own honor points, which had reached an astonishing 6,000. Yi-han estimated that it was because he showed his force in front of three-way snobbery, mutant, human, Asgard, at the same time that he had so many honor points. For Yi-han, who has 6,000 honor points in his pocket, he also said that it is time for him to draw a lottery. Then he opened the system mall and planned to draw a lottery. For Yi-han, who has proven himself to be the Emperor of Europe countless times. He thought and roared, "Nothing can't be solved in one lottery. If there is, then twice." So Yi-han increased his bet without hesitation, planning to get a local tyrant level lottery of 3,000. For the current Yi-han, he is indeed a local tyrant. Yi-han was very excited to press the lottery. Congratulations to the host for getting 2 more visits. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the evolution crystal. For the results of the lottery, Yi-han seemed very calm. Said that he was a person who had seen big winds and waves, and this small reward was not enough to make him feel excited, so he clicked the lottery twice without hesitation. Congratulations to the host for gaining Levi's light service, Xiake Sing. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Kung Fu of Bodhidharma, Mantra. Heart Sutra. Yi-han is still calm about such rewards. Calm down. This kid is the illegitimate son of Daidao. The system murmured helplessly again. Very proud, Yi-han also opened the portal directly and went to the familiar suburb again. Then it was time to receive the award very happily. Item name, Evolution Crystal. Item ability, use it to evolve the blood. The initial stage of evolutionary success rate is 100%, the second time is 25%, the third time is 5%, and so on. Yi-han took a sigh of relief as he watched the introduction of the evolution crystal. This ugly thing is definitely a sought-after item. If you have evolved the blood of the demon seed, then don't be too cool. Chapter 39. Yi-han put away the evolution crystal first, and then looked at the other 2 rewards. After all, he still doesn't know what effect the evolution crystal will bring. So let's finish receiving the reward first. Xiake Sing, one of the unique tricks learned by the peerless genius Levi, divided into 9 layers. The first layer can move freely within 100 meters, and will leave a phantom in place, and can return to the phantom position at any time. The current practice progress is 1/9. Mantra. Heart Sutra, polishing the peerless technique that has gone through thousands of hardships and comprehension. Mainly defensive, it is divided into 9 layers, and the universe is practiced to the highest point and the universe is destroyed without injury. Currently advance 1/9. After receiving the reward, Yi-han finally got out of the embarrassing situation of having to transform into a stronger enemy. Yi-han, who was very satisfied with this reward, also used the evolution crystal he had just obtained. System. How to use this stuff? Yi-han asked while looking at the evolution crystal in his hand. Because the host currently only has one bloodline, the host can take it directly. Anyway, the success rate is 100%. Yi-han listened to the system and swallowed the evolution crystal without hesitation. After swallowing the evolution crystal, Yihan also noticed that the blood in his body was slowly burning. That's right, the feeling of burning. At this moment, the blood of Yihan's whole body became extremely hot. The whole person looked like he was placed in a steamer. The skin of his body was constantly emitting white smoke, and even his skin became strangely red. This feeling of enthusiasm made Yihan couldn't help but exclaimed, "Ah!" After venting, Yihan also noticed the difference in his body. "And I feel like I have infinite power." So Yihan was very excited and opened his own attribute panel. Host name, Yihan Physical Fitness, 100 times that of ordinary people. Skills, Spear Fighting, 1/3, a Knight. 1/9, Bloodline, Demon Seed Elementary Level. With ability Madness. Gongfa, Mantra. Heart Sutra. 1/9 Life Skills, Master of Language. Hero, Cai Wenji. Yihan was surprised at this moment. I didn't expect that ability would be so terrifying after only using the evolution crystal. Although he hasn't transformed, he can feel from his blood that he will definitely become even more terrifying after being transformed. And more importantly, his bloodline evolution this time actually strengthened his physical fitness. It has increased 100 times. What is the concept of 100 times? If you swing your fist with all your strength, you can reach 10 tons. 3 times as Captain America, who represents the pinnacle of mankind. Coupled with his newly acquired technique, Yihan is now a humanoid beast. Even if he doesn't change his body, he can still hang Dr. Lizard based on his physical fitness. After receiving all the rewards, Yihan also returned to Tony Stark's villa. At this time, Yihan also found that Pepper Pibo had returned with Cai Wenji. Seeing the sudden appearance of Yihan, he was only surprised and stretched out his hand and smiled, "Hello, I am Tony Stark's secretary, Pei Bai. My name is Yihan, Tony's friend." Yihan smiled and shook hands with Pibo and said, "I heard Tony mentioned you." "Oh? Then can you tell me my image in his mind?" Pibo also smiled and took the topic. Yihan pretended to remember seriously, thinking about it, touching his chin, and said, "He said you are a girl he can't live without." "I don't know this kind of evaluation, what do you think of Miss Pibo?" Pibo, who had already expected it, shrugged helplessly. "You know, he is just like a kid in some places, so it's normal to be inseparable from me." Yihan nodded in agreement with Pibo's confident words. After all, judging from the movie, Iron Man takes care of his own life. Ability really can only be called Tony shit at this time. Cai Wenji, who was ignored by the side, was unhappy. "Brother, you are a big badass. You haven't noticed the cute Wenji for so long." Yihan looked at the little bit who had been standing next to him, and touched her head helplessly. "Didn't you notice it now?" Yihan said with a smile. Cai Wenji, who is very witty, said that he would not eat this set of hay. "I knew bullying me when I was young, and I was fooled all day long." Yihan. In such a situation, Yihan can only quickly change the subject. "Then can you tell me what you did today?" Yihan directly mentioned Cai Wenji's idea, and saw Cai Wenji happily holding it with his hand, and said while pulling it, "Today, I went to a place called an amusement park and sat on tall wheels. Then I made a Trojan horse. In the end I went to buy a lot of new clothes and." Yihan looked at Wenji, who was very excited. Yihan also thanked Pibo next to him, "Thank you for taking care of this child today. It seems that she had a very happy day today." Admiring it, he just smiled and shook his head, indicating that it's okay. After sending Wenji back, Pibo finished dinner in the villa and left because of the company's business. And because Cai Wenji, who had been playing for a day during the day, fell asleep early after eating. When Yihan was about to pack his things and go to bed, his cell phone that hadn't ringed for a long time came to mind, and Yihan answered the phone suspiciously. "Yihan! Come to Osborn Building. Otherwise, it will be too late." Yihan heard Gwen's anxious voice on the phone. Yihan also hurriedly comforted, "Don't worry. You hide in a safe place and I will come right away." Chapter 40. After Yihan finished speaking, he hung up the phone, then opened the space portal and headed directly to the Osborn Building. When Yihan came to the Osborn Building, he happened to see Gwen hiding next to a precision instrument. Yihan was relieved to see Gwen, who was safe and sound. After all, Yihan was really afraid that his little butterfly would fan the plot and cause Gwen to encounter any threats. So he ran forward to comfort the panicked Gwen. "It's okay, I'm here. Don't be afraid." Can you tell me about the situation at the scene now? Gwen, who was initially panicked, looked at Yi-Han who had suddenly appeared, and threw himself directly into Yi-Han's arms as if he had found the backbone. Then he resisted the panic in his heart and explained slowly, that huge amounts of lizard monster is a doctor. He ran out of the police station and now wants the entire city to become a lizard monster, but now Spider-Man is outside to stop him. So hurry up and help him. After listening to Gwen's general description, Yi-Han basically knew what happened. It seems that everything is following his own plan. Dr. Lizard really escaped from the police station. Yi-Han thought evilly, with the proper expression of a big villain. I know that the police in Marvel's world are not reliable. Yi-Han complained helplessly. Then he comforted the panicked Gwen and asked her to find a safe place to hide, preferably to leave the Osborn building, and then walk towards the top of the Osborn building. After all, the results that I have planned for so long are also time to reap the results. Yi-Han directly used Xiake Seeing and came to the top of the building in a blink of an eye. Looking at the Spider-Man being abused, Yi-Han also felt a moment of silence for the hapless child. But the most important thing is that Yi-Han actually found that Dr. Lizard seems to be taller than ever before. Wouldn't it be strengthened here? Yi-Han thought nervously. After all, the setting of the Marvel world is too cheating, and a good villain said that if you strengthen it, you will strengthen it. Therefore, Yi-Han is really afraid that Dr. Lizard will suddenly become aggressive, and then he will not have to play. After all, Yi-Han doesn't want to transform here, but fortunately, after Yi-Han experienced Thor's incident, ability has also strengthened a lot, at least it became more than 100,000 times more powerful before transforming. At this moment, Yi-Han did not rush to help, but quietly watched the Spider-Man pretend to be abused next to him. Through the battle, Yi-Han was surprised to find that Dr. Lizard had indeed become stronger, and his personal power had reached at least 10 tons. You must know that Yi-Han's power at the moment is only 10 tons. Fortunately, Yi-Han has also got 2 skills and upgraded blood after the lottery, so Yi-Han is still sure to hang Dr. Lizard without changing his body. At this moment, the fighting Spider-Man was also swept out by Dr. Lizard's tail, and then hit the wall. It didn't slow down for a long time. And Yi-Han also knew that he was almost ready to play. Yi-Han directly used 2 knights to immediately come behind Dr. Lizard who was about to go up and attack the knife. Dr. Lizard, who was unceremoniously swept his legs, was swept away without any preparation. Then he slammed into the pillar next to him, and was even more unlucky enough to be crushed underneath. At this moment, Yi-Han also looked at the Spider-Man who was almost playing off, and said in a tone of predecessor looking at the younger generation, "It seems that you already have a heroic heart." At this moment, Spider-Man still feels grateful for this superhero that he originally hated. After all, the other party saved himself. Isn't it? Spider-Man climbed up against the wall with difficulty, and said to Yi-Han, who suddenly appeared to save him, "Thank you so much, otherwise I really gave birth to a dead bug." After listening, Yi-Han knew that the Spider-Man had come out of the shadows, so he comforted, "Now you are not a bug, but a Spider-Man. Now you are qualified to be a hero." Looking at the shocked Spider-Man Yi-Han in front of him, he continued, "Before you were like a madman who only knew revenge and a showy poor DK, now you are at least a qualified hero." For Yi-Han's sudden Zanyang, Spider-Man also expressed a dazed look. Looking at the bewildered Spider-Man, Yi-Han also knew that his chicken soup was too strong. So he recruited Roar, "I'll go up and tackle that big guy first. You're watching and learning by your side." After speaking, he ignored the daunting Spider-Man. He walked directly to Dr. Lizard who had crawled out of the pillar anyway. Chapter 41. Yi-Han walked up to Dr. Lizard unpreparedly and said helplessly, "Isn't it okay to lie down on the ground? Why do I need to get up again to look for abuse?" With regard to Dr. Lizard who has lost his sanity at the moment, he will not listen to Yi-Han quietly. So he roared loudly and rushed towards Yi-Han who was on the opposite side. In this situation, Yi-Han was just a slight one and moved next to him, and escaped the calling of Dr. Lizard. Dr. Lizard, who rushed to the air, swept his tail at Yi-Han wisely. Yi-Han, who did not expect this trick, was swept away by this sudden attack. Then it stopped directly after hitting the wall, and the person who was swept away probably estimated the strength of Dr. Lizard in his heart. I found that Dr. Lizard's tail sweeping force was about 13 tons, and I didn't suffer too much damage when hitting myself. Yi-Han also finds it a bit weird for such a situation, he can withstand 13 tons of impact in his usual state. What kind of concept is this? It's equivalent to being absolutely awesome in Marvel. Definitely does not include the existence of bugs like Phoenix and Galactus. After all, Yi-Han at the moment is not so powerful. But Yi-Han just thought for a while. You think it's reasonable? After all, he originally has the blood of the demon seed. The physical fitness is originally different from ordinary people. Coupled with Dharma's abnormal defense technique, he can do this step. It seems it's not too surprising. So Yi-Han, who understands the strength gap between the two sides, is also proud of him. Under his current situation, he can still directly crush the other side. So Yi-Han smiled and said, "A knight travels thousands of miles without staying." Then he left a phantom on the spot and rushed towards Dr. Lizard. Yi-Han kicked Dr. Lizard's head heavily, and then flew out under the impact of huge amounts of force. Looking at Dr. Lizard who was kicked 10 meters away by himself, Yi-Han couldn't help thinking, damn. Why is there no martial skill in Bodhidharma's exercises? Otherwise, I feel that Dr. Lizard doubts life. Know that Bodhidharma has another title, Tian, Remnant Feat. You are not satisfied with your Yi-Han, and at the same time you urgently know that you need martial arts skills. How do you show your strength without violence? How to pretend if you do not have cool martial skills? So at this moment, Yi-Han is very eager for a few more awesome martial arts. The only one who can pretend to be a knight is now Yi-Han thought sadly, and now he realizes that he is still a pauper. System. If possible, please kill this guy who is cheaper and sells well. Closer to home, being kicked out, Dr. Lizard stood up like an immortal Xiao Qiang, said. I can continue. Yi-Han looked at Dr. Lizard who was very persistent and expressed his admiration. So made a very important decision. That is, to meet his requirements. Since you like to be abused so much, my uncle will definitely satisfy you. Yi-Han, with such thoughts, also rushed directly. An unskilled punch hit Dr. Lizard, and Dr. Lizard faced him with a punch, raising his paw to greet him without hesitation. The collision of fists and claws caused the surrounding air to oscillate a bit, and Yi-Han, who was not as powerful as Dr. Lizard, was directly smashed into the air. Yi-Han, who was smashed into the air, suddenly felt that he was so stupid. Obviously knowing that you are not as powerful as the other party, are you stupid to go head-to-head with others? Yi-Han complained very contemptuously. But this time, Yi-Han, who has learned cleverly, will not continue to go head-to-head with Dr. Lizard. You must know that Dr. Lizard at this moment didn't know what medicine he had knocked on. He was so tall, 4 or 5 meters, and his strength was astonishing, 13 tons, and even the restoration of ability was perverted. Broken limb reborn easily. Regarding this situation, Yi-Han once wondered if he was in the Marvel world in the comic version. After all, an early Dr. Lizard was so perverted how to play afterwards. But what Yi-Han didn't know was that Dr. Lizard had used 1,000 times the lizard potion in order to make his plan go smoothly. That's why it became so terrifying. And because the lizard potion used is 1,000 times, Dr. Lizard at the moment is basically no different from a beast except for the obsession to evolve the humans in this city. To be honest, Yi-Han is still quite tangled at the moment. Because he was considering whether he would continue to play or just go home and sleep. You know that for Dr. Lizard, Yi-Han can solve it by moving his skills, purification. But he didn't want to solve it too early because he wanted to continue to brush honor points. After thinking about it for a long time, Yi-Han still absolutely pretends to be a bee under the broad masses of people before leaving. Chapter 42. Yi-Han did not hesitation to launch a nightly trip, and after leaving a phantom in place, he instantly appeared behind Dr. Lizard, lifting his foot and wanted to kick Dr. Lizard's head. However, Dr. Lizard, who had suffered several losses, had already prepared. He reacted directly and quickly and swept out Yi-Han, who was kicked from behind with his tail. Yi-Han, caught off guard, was also swept down the Osborn building. But fortunately, the shape of the Osborn building is uneven, so although Yi-Han was hit many times during the fall, at least a large part of the force was removed, so the impact generated by the drop is not very big. However, he fell heavily on the street, leaving a large spider web-like pit. Yi-Han got up from the ground very hard, and couldn't help but cough out some visceral fragments. Damn it! I've got an internal injury after playing a lot. Yi-Han thought bitterly. Fortunately, Yi-Han's physique is different from ordinary people's resilience. Although he is not as perverted as Dr. Lizard, he can withstand such a small injury. It seems that we have to solve it quickly and find Wen Ji to treat her injury. So Yi-Han directly used 2 nights in a row, and remounted the roof to watch Dr. Lizard, who was about to walk towards the transmitter. He also immediately used the knight to come to the back of Dr. Lizard, picked up its thick tail, and threw it towards the underside of Osborn's building. Obviously Yi-Han was also worried about falling down the Osborn building. So he planned to use the same method against Dr. Lizard. The result was exactly what Yi-Han thought. Dr. Lizard did fall, but its tail remained in Yi-Han's hands. Yi-Han looked at the dock tail that kept shaking and flowing green blood and threw it aside in disgust. Sure enough. Lizards are the most disgusting. Especially this kind of guy who docks and escapes. Yi-Han cursed fiercely in his heart. However, in order to prevent Dr. Lizard from escaping, Yi-Han also jumped directly, and when approaching the ground, he quickly used the knight to relieve all the impact. How to look at Dr. Lizard lying on the ground without moving, Yi-Han also felt very puzzled. This guy's recovery ability can't be so easy to hang up. With this thought, Yi-Han walked up, ready to observe Dr. Lizard carefully. However, Yi-Han only came to Dr. Lizard's side, and the other party immediately jumped up and hunched over and bent his body and hit Yi-Han directly with his hard head. Yi-Han was also directly taken out and stood on the wall of the street. A human-shaped recess also appeared on the wall, and Yi-Han, who felt his heart boring, was also annoyed. Dr. Lizard, who had no reason, actually posed himself with beast's cunning nature. How does this make him not irritated? Yi-Han yelled out of anger, and then mobilized the knight to quickly get close to Dr. Lizard. He smashed Dr. Lizard's face with a fist full of anger, watching Dr. Lizard flying out. Yi-Han didn't let go of the opportunity to beat the dog in the water, so he ran up and kicked Dr. Lizard, who had fallen to the ground. Dr. Lizard, who was kicked in the abdomen by Yi-Han, slid directly on the ground for a long time. At the same time, because of Yi-Han's angry punch, he was directly blinded. It took a long time to slowly get up from the ground. Dr. Lizard looked at Yi-Han with fear in his eyes, and at the same time he began to think about running away. After all, it's beast's instinct to run if you can't beat it. Looking at Dr. Lizard with obvious fear in his eyes, Yi-Han smiled disdainfully. Sure enough. Is he a beast without wisdom? Only when he is beaten hard can he be afraid. For Dr. Lizard, who was obviously afraid of being beaten by him, Yi-Han did not intend to let him go. After all, this is his own weapon for scoring. But at this time, Dr. Lizard also yelled angrily, then lifted the car next to him and slammed it at Yi-Han. For the flying car, Yi-Han also used a sliding step to avoid directly. Then he looked in the direction of Dr. Lizard and found that the other party had disappeared. When was beast so smart? Yi-Han thought helplessly. Then, looking at the open sewer well, Yi-Han chased him up without hesitation. He jumped directly and quickly, and then immediately used the knight to chase him. Before long, Yi-Han found Dr. Lizard, but Yi-Han did not immediately go up and stop him. It is to shorten the distance of the knights, keeping oneself from losing with Dr. Lizard, and at the same time preventing the other party from discovering himself. As for Yi-Han's purpose, it is also very simple. This is what he thought of when he saw Dr. Lizard, who knocked on Viagra tonight. Chapter 43. Yi-Han's decision is also very simple, that is, since he intends to survive in the Marvel world, he must have enough power. Not only is the heroic power from the King of Glory, but also the local power, so Yi-Han intends to convince some local villains. And Dr. Lizard is one of his goals this time. After all, Dr. Lizard is quite perverted. And his research is also very useful. So Yi-Han regards it as the first villain he intends to conquer. Yi-Han, who soon followed Dr. Lizard, also followed the target to his lair. After Yi-Han saw that his goal was achieved, he hurried out immediately. Dr. Lizard also roared angrily when he saw Yi-Han, who appeared suddenly, and then he directly picked up the instrument next to him and was about to slam into Yi-Han. Seeing such a violent and wild Dr. Lizard, Yi-Han immediately used Xiake Xing, came to Dr. Lizard and used purification directly on him. Dr. Lizard, who was hit by evolution, immediately put down the instrument in his hand, and then hugged his head and wailed in despair. Soon Dr. Lizard returned to normal in Yi-Han's eyes, looking at Dr. Lizard, who had returned to normal. Yi-Han also tentatively asked, "How about being sober?" After returning to normal, Dr. Connors listened to Yi-Han's temptation, and replied with trepidation, "Thank you for your help. Otherwise I would really bet a big mistake." Yi-Han just heard it and said, "Don't get me wrong, I am not helping you for free. I appreciate your talents and your research projects." After a pause, Yi-han looked at Dr. Connors, who was listening carefully. You continued to explain, so I plan to let you serve me. After hearing this, Dr. Connors immediately refused with excitement. I will never give such a dangerous thing. Yi-han directly sneered at Dr. Connors' high-sounding words. Today you have to agree anyway. Because you have no choice. After speaking, he stepped on him. At this moment, Dr. Connors also knew that the other party was obviously not a good person, and he also knew where he was. The sophisticated Dr. Connors is now afraid of Yi-han's threat, but he still says bluntly, without me, you can't get anything. Yi-han didn't care about Dr. Kang's threat. Do you know why you didn't solve you halfway? You need to bring me here. I guess all your research materials are here, right? So if you don't cooperate, I can also take these materials. After listening to Yi-han's words, Dr. Connors' expression obviously changed, and then he resignedly said, let's talk. What do you need me for? Dr. Connors. Yi-han still admires the instant recognition. My purpose is very simple. Don't you always want to solve your defective physical problems? I can help you. I can fund you to continue the experiment. And if you research things out, I will not occupy your reputation. It just needs him to accomplish certain purposes. Teacher Kang's eyes flashed after hearing Yi's words. Obviously he was also a little tempted by such a request. Looking at Dr. Connors, who was clearly moved, Yi-han chased after victory. Because of what you did, you are already a wanted criminal in the United States. So at this moment, you can only continue to study if you surrender to me, and I can provide you with it. Laboratory, an absolutely safe place. How about? Dr. Connors nodded resigningly. I am willing to surrender to you, but you must guarantee that I will not be taken to prison. Yi-han looked so acquainted with Dr. Connors. Yi-han didn't plan to give him a sweet date and a stick. Instead, he replied directly, okay. I have a private island with a base on it, so you feel safe, and there is a laboratory on it, so you can continue to ensure that you study it. Then Yi-han looked at the other side like a mouse's nest and didn't want to stay any longer. Hurry up and pack your experimental data. Then we will leave here immediately. After hearing this, Dr. Connors immediately set off to sort out the experimental data and information. Looking at Dr. Connors, who was obviously unable to solve the problem in a short while, Yi-han opened the space portal directly and returned to the Osborn building. After all, Gwen is still there waiting for him, so Yi-han must also rush over to deal with the rest of the matter. Yi-han opened the space portal and came to the roof of the Osborn building. He looked at the Spider-Man, who was almost well, and asked, how about? Is the body okay? After listening to Yi-han's question, Spider-Man immediately got up from the ground and replied, there is nothing wrong now. What about Dr. Lizard? Yi-han shrugged helplessly. It looks like he ran away. Spider-Man was relieved when he heard it. It's better to run than to die. After all, Dr. Lizard is also his teacher. No matter from a hero's point of view or a personal point of view, I don't want the opponent to die. Looking at Spider-Man, who was okay, Yi-han didn't plan to continue talking. After all, he came to Gwen, not to see little Spider-Man. After Yi-han called Roar directly, he hurried to find Gwen. After arriving at the place where Gwen first stayed, he didn't find the other person. Yi-han also estimated that this Nizai should have ran out in order not to distract herself. So Yi-han ran to the street and finally found Gwen in the crowd. Just when Yi-han was going to call Roar, Gwen suddenly made a gesture of prohibition to him nervously, and then pointed to the policeman next to him. Yi-han looked at the police chief next to him, and he also understood. It turned out that the old man was by the side. After all, Gwen's tutoring is quite strict, especially his father of the chief, but he hates these superheroes very much. So Yi-han just nodded at her across the crowd, then opened the space portal and disappeared under everyone's eyes. Chapter 44. When Yi-han returned to Dr. Connor's rat-like residence, he had already prepared all the information. Seeing Dr. Yi-han Connors, who suddenly appeared, he was not surprised. After all, his memory was still retained when he became Dr. Lizard. So I also know that Yi-han has such a power. It seems that he can open a door to some places. Boss, where are we going now? Dr. Connors asked impatiently. Yi-han thought for a while and decided to place Dr. Connors with Tony Stark first. After all, he doesn't have a place to go now, and for that island, Yi-han probably won't be ready at Tony Stark in a while. So I decided to arrange Dr. Connors to Tony Stark first. After all, that place is not only safe, but the villa is also quite large, so it would be nice to arrange Dr. Connors there for now. Moreover, Tony and Dr. Connors are both research madmen, so they should have common topics. Yi-Han, who was so decided, also directly opened the space portal, and took Dr. Connors into it. In a blink of an eye, he returned to the villa. Dr. Connors was surprised to see how far he crossed an unknown distance in an instant with just a small step. Although he knew that Yi-Han had such a kind of ability, he didn't expect this ability to be so small and terrifying. The offer Yi-Han is even heavier. After all, if one day he chooses to defect, and then run to a far place with great pains. In the end, I was directly overtaken by others in a small step. The scene was too beautiful to think about. As a result, Dr. Connors's last bit of luck was gone, he couldn't beat others, and couldn't run away. How to play? Yi-Han, who came to the Tony Stark villa, said directly to J.A.R.V.I.S, "You arrange for a guy to take a shower and clean up, and then arrange a room for him." J.A.R.V.I.S listened to it and did not follow the hesitation, because Tony Stark gave him the instruction that except for the laboratory not allowing Yi-Han to enter, other places are open to Yi-Han. So it is not a big deal for Yi-Han to arrange a person to live in the villa. And Dr. Connors was also curious when he heard Yi-Han actually speak to the void. Then I was even more shocked when I heard the voice of Jarvis. Although the black technology in the Marvel world is everywhere, the real artificial intelligence is currently only Tony Stark. That's why he was so surprised, and at the same time more curious about the origin of Yi-Han. The mysterious ability, the incomparably powerful combat power, and the most important thing is this terrifying technology, all of which shocked him too much. After seeing Dr. Connors being led by J.A.R.V.I.S, Yi-Han also came to Cai Wenji's room. Looking at Cai Wenji, who was already asleep, Yi-Han didn't bother him, and he went back to the room to sleep first. Regarding the injuries he suffered, Yi-Han felt that it would not be a big problem for him to delay for a day or two. Maybe it would be fine tomorrow. Yi-Han likes to think optimistically. After all, with Yi-Han's terrifying physical quality, the recovery of ability was originally quite fast, and it would basically be able to fully recover from internal injuries like this in 1 week. Yi-Han took a very refreshing bath and then opened the system panel. Seeing that this time he only obtained 1500 glory points, he also felt speechless for a while. Oh! If this continues, when can we collect 100,000 glory points to be a local tyrant? Yi-Han thought tragedy. He is even more desperate for the rare honor points, which also makes him have to think of other ways to get more heroes and honor points. So Yi-Han also called out the system and asked, "System, is there no other way to get honor and hero equipment?" The department was silent for a while and prompted, "Yes. The host can receive tasks from the system, thus speeding up the speed of obtaining honor points." "Then do you have a task now?" Yi-Han asked impatiently. "Yes, the system tasks are refreshed once a week, which is also called weekly tasks, so if the host wants to complete the task, just take it directly. But there are some restrictions." Yi-Han nodded and motioned for the system to continue. Limit 1, weekly quests can only be claimed once a week, and only one quest will be refreshed. Limit 2, the quest is not completed after receiving, although there is no penalty, but it will be stuck there, that is, the first week's quest. If it is not completed, it will not be possible to continue the task for the second week. Regarding the two limitations of the system, Yi-Han also felt that it was no big deal. After all, there will be punishment for failure of other system tasks, and there will be no punishment for failure of this system task. So in general, my system is relatively loose, and it meets my requirements very well, although it is a bit pitted. So Yi-Han couldn't wait to start the weekly task. Then look at the task introduction above. Chapter 45. Task name, Own Your Own Territory. Mission goal, the host must have its own territory in this world for a month, and must have absolute control. Task reward, 6 long-range launching guns of Lubin 7. Intercontinental missile level. Honor value 7000. Task status, unclaimed status. Yi-Han looked at the tasks of the system and suddenly felt like the world was losing money. After all, I started planning for this matter when I came into this world, and this matter is almost done, almost in all likelihood. Unexpectedly, today I accidentally hit the weekly mission by accident. That's why Yi-Han felt like he was losing money in the sky, so Yi-Han chose to take the task without hesitation. After all, this kind of task of sending honor points is not accepted. After all, this is picked up. After solving his own heart disease, Yihan also fell asleep directly on the bed. The next day Yihan was called out of bed by Wenji, and it was almost 9 o'clock. Then Yihan looked at Wenji, who was cute, and asked with a smile, "Wenji is looking for me, what's the matter?" "I'm here to wake you up for breakfast, and I found out that we have another stranger here, so I wake you up." After listening to Wenji's words, Yihan basically knew that he was talking about Dr. Connors. So he smiled and touched her head and said, "He is brother's friend, don't worry about this, let's have breakfast now." So after breakfast, Yihan also found Wenji, who was watching TV, asked her to treat herself, and by the way called Dr. Connors next to her. After all, Wenji's treatment was originally scoped. It doesn't matter if there is one more person, and the most important point is that Yihan is worried that Dr. Connors will be injured because of the lizard potion, so he called him together. "If you die for this reason, then some play." Wenji did not hesitation and summoned her own weapon for this kind of thing, and then began to heal the two of them. After a few minutes, the refreshed two could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. Especially Dr. Connors looked at Wenji with a very surprised look. After all, he had never seen such an existence. The nanny is popular wherever she goes. "Boss, is this little girl mutant?" Dr. Connors asked very curiously. "No. He and I are from the same place, and neither of us is mutant." After hearing this, Dr. Connors nodded thoughtfully and then continued to ask, "Then when shall we go to the base?" Yihan was very embarrassed and thought about it, and then estimated in his heart how long it would take the island to be completed. Then he said uncertainly, "I guess it should be a week later." "Don't be too anxious now, Tony Stark is dealing with this matter, we just have to wait." When Dr. Connors heard that the check made by Yihan was a blank check, he was speechless in an instant. But now that he was on the thief ship, Dr. Connors could only admit his fate. Yihan looked at Dr. Connors with a bad face, and didn't explain anything. After all, the results will be available in a week, and there is no need to waste his tongue. Just 3 days later, Tony Stark also returned to the villa. "The matter about the small island you want has been settled. It does not belong to any country in the high seas of the Pacific Ocean and it is very large, but there are also a lot of beasts on it." Tony Stark is also slowly approaching Yi Han explained. "Yihan, I am more concerned about whether that tower can really live 100,000 people." Tony Stark smiled triumphantly, "Then you underestimated the island. The initial estimate is that it can live at least 500,000 people. And it's still very loose." After hearing Tony Stark's answer, Yihan nodded in relief and continued to ask, "When will the base above be repaired?" Tony Stark said confidently, "The slowest is 8 days. If it is faster, it can be done in 6 days, but I still have something to explain to you about that island." "Oh? What's the matter?" Tony Stark said embarrassedly, "There is a terrible island that sits at a distance of 2,000 kilometers, so no one wants that island." "What island? It makes you feel terrible too?" Yihan quipped. Tony Stark said seriously, "The name of the island is Skull Island. It was discovered 30 years ago." Yihan immediately became calm when he heard the name of this island. "Damn! Is this King Kong chaotic?" Yihan reluctantly complained. But he was not very worried. After all, it seemed that the creatures inside the island couldn't get out, and the creatures outside were also difficult to get in, so there was not much conflict with Yihan. And the most important point is that Yihan is also very interested in Skull Island. In particular, the prehistoric behemoths above should be quite valuable for research, and maybe they can be used well by then. For others, Skull Island is really scary, but for Yihan, it is a natural gene treasure. Yihan, who knows the plot, is very clear about what is on Skull Island. Chapter 46. For those magical species on Skull Island, if there is no research value, Yihan doesn't believe it. The research value of the King Kong alone is definitely worth playing. The most important thing is that God knows how abnormal the King Kong in the Marvel world is. Therefore, Yihan does not have the idea of hitting Skull Island immediately. After all, with his current ability, he really does not dare to go to Skull Island rashly, whether it is the King Kong 1 or King Kong 2 plot. He was not sure to go up, and he would be able to come out alive in the future. Especially the Skull Island in the Marvel world, Yihan dare to 100% guarantee that it is definitely more terrifying than the Skull Island in the normal movie. So Yihan only had the idea of hitting Skull Island, but he didn't even think of acting immediately. At this time, Tony also gave out another news that surprised Yihan. That is the resurrection of Captain America. The Captain America who was sleeping under the Antarctic glacier had already woken up in S.H.I.E.L.D 2 days ago. However, Yi-Han didn't think it mattered. Anyway, with his current ability Captain America, he really didn't threaten him. But if Captain America wakes up, it basically proves that the story of Avengers is almost the same, and it would be cool to get honor points in New York when that time comes. Talking and chatting, Tony also talked about the content about Dr. Connors. However, Yi-Han didn't conceal the origin of Dr. Connors, and directly shook out that Dr. Connors was a lizardman. On the contrary, Tony didn't have any reaction after knowing it, which makes Yi-Han feel very strange. After all, for a superhero like Tony, there is no sign of hiding a wanted criminal in his home, which makes Yi-Han feel very strange. But Tony Stark also quickly revealed his reason. I can't control you guys anyway, so you have brought people home, and I can't help it. And the most important point is that I know that you are not malicious to the earth, so letting him follow you is at least better than falling into the hands of some politicians. Yi-Han nodded in agreement with Tony's answer. According to the urinary nature of the government of Country M, if Dr. Connors fell into their hands, he could really do something. Maybe the army will produce a group of lizardmen. This is not Yi-Han's alarmist talk, but such a thing is really possible. From the so-called Weapon X project and General Ross Hulk Super Soldier project, we can see how crazily the M country's army is for power. When the two of them continued to talk in depth, Yi-Han's cell phone suddenly rang. Yi-Han basically knows who's calling even if he doesn't need to listen. After all, his phone number was only given to Gwen. Therefore, only he would call himself at this time, and Yi-Han directly connected the phone. And Gwen's voice came out on the phone, "Honey. Come to my house for an emergency." Yi-Han was very puzzled after hearing this. You must know that Gwen never called Roar his dear. The most important point is that Gwen has a very strict and old-fashioned dad. How could it be possible to invite myself to her house? Yi-Han hung up the phone with such doubts. Just about to explain to Tony, the opposite Tony immediately showed an expression that an old driver knew. Go. I wish you a galloping horse tonight, but remember to bring a cover. Yi-Han. But Yi-Han didn't bother to explain anything to this guy, but directly opened the space portal and stepped in. Because of the reason Yi-Han sent Gwen home last time, he also knows where Gwen's home is. After passing through the space portal, Yi-Han went directly to the lobby of Gwen's house. He looked at Gwen, who was sitting in the lobby with a smile on his face, and asked, "It's 9 o'clock in the evening, what can I do?" "You are not afraid?" your dad said. Gwen, sitting on the sofa, listened to the caress and smiled charmingly, then stood up from the sofa and threw himself directly into Yi-Han's arms. "Can't you call you over to accompany me at 9 o'clock? Gwen said, lying in Yi-Han's arms. Yi-Han frowned directly at this situation, because she felt very strange about Gwen today. After all, ordinary Gwen is very easy to be shy. However, today's Gwen is so passionate and bold. While Yi-Han was a little bit overwhelmed, a big black question mark flashed in his heart. So Yi-Han resisted the throbbing in his heart and pushed away Gwen, who was attached to him, solemnly said, "Why are you looking for me at night?" Gwen, who was pushed aside by Yi-Han, said aggrieved, "Is it okay if people miss you?" Yi-Han sneered directly after hearing this, "Hee. No need to pretend, you are definitely not Gwen." If Yi-Han only felt that there was a problem at the beginning, now he is 100% sure that the person opposite is definitely not Gwen. In his impression, Gwen is a girl who is easier to be shy, she will definitely not be as bold as she is today, especially even inviting herself to her house. This made him even more suspicious. Chapter 47. Gwen on the other side couldn't help but shrink when he heard Yi-Han's words, but he still pretended to be calm and asked, "My dear. What's wrong? Is there something wrong with me today?" Gwen Yi-Han, who is still acting at the moment, said impatiently, "Mystique, you don't have to pretend. Since I answered your call, your clumsy acting skills have been full of loopholes, do you have to do it? Are you willing to explain honestly?" Gwen on the opposite side listened to Yi-Han's ridicule, and his whole body changed for a while, and a woman with blue skin and scaly armor appeared in front of Yi-Han. Then he asked without giving up, "How do you know me?" And Yi-Han looked at Mystique, who had already shown his true identity. Yi-Han did not immediately answer Mystique or asked nervously, "Where is Gwen? What happened to him?" Mystique on the opposite side listened to Yi-Han's nervous tone and said with a smile, "You don't have to worry about your little girlfriend. She is sleeping in her room now, and I guarantee that he has not suffered any harm. Then he looked at Yi-han, who was calm, and continued, you haven't told me, where do I show my feet? Yi-han breathed a sigh of relief when he heard that Gwen was fine, and then explained, you must have not understood Gwen's character well, and the most important point is that I know there are people like you, so you appear in front of me. I started to doubt you when I was there. Mystique was very angry and asked, then what you just said was cheating me. In response to Mystique's question, Yi-han shrugged very innocently. You can't stand the fraud and blame me. Mystique looked at the innocent face of Yi-han and gritted her silver teeth in anger. However, after thinking that he was not the opponent of this guy in front of him, he could only helplessly suppress the irritation in his heart. And at this time Yi-han also asked his own question, what are you doing, so lied to me by all means. The opposite Mystique asked with a smile, since you are so smart. Can you guess my purpose of looking for you? After listening to Yi-han, he started to think in his heart. Now what is the purpose of the other party looking for himself? First of all, the opponent didn't seem to report too much hostility towards him, so he rejected the stalk that came to make trouble for him, and then the opponent should not have joined Mutants Brotherhood at this moment. After all, this world is the world after restarting time. If this is the case, Mystique at the moment should be just a Lone Ranger, and Mutants Brotherhood has not been established. Then it is intriguing to find the purpose of oneself, and then Yi-han suddenly remembered that Professor X was looking for himself a few days ago. There was a flash of light in my mind and he confidently asked, do you come to me because you want me to join Professor X's mutant school? Raven couldn't help being surprised when Yi-han had calculated his purpose so simply. It's another pervert with high IQ. Mystique Raven said helplessly. However, he did not deny his purpose at the moment, but said bluntly, yes. I am looking for you for the purpose of letting you join mutant school. Yi-han asked helplessly, I remember you are not from mutant school? Why are you running errands for them? Yi-han also doesn't think that Professor X will ask Raven for help after he fails. So where did Mystique get the news, and then rushed over to find herself without thinking? Thinking like this, Yi-han also asked very funny, where did you definitely get the gossip, just came to me. Then he looked at Raven, whose expression was slightly moving, and Yi-han secretly said that it was true. However, he continued to pour cold water, Professor X also came to me, and I also refused to join his school. As for the reason, I think you should know that I am not a mutant. At this moment, Raven was going to sit on the sofa with a frustrated expression and said helplessly, I originally wanted to lie to you to join X school, but who knew that you guys actually broke my disguise directly? It seems that the plan is no longer working. Now what are you going to do to me? At this moment, Raven doesn't think that he can run away after failing his action. After all, let's not talk about the terrifying combat power of the other party, just say that his ability, which is thousands of miles away, has no ability to escape from his hands. Looking at the frustrated Raven, Yi-han also thought about it carefully. He also knew that although he didn't want to join X Academy now, he could at least maintain a cooperative relationship with them. After all, in the upcoming apocalypse plot, a large wave of glory values can be easily brushed. After these days of understanding, Yi-han probably also knows how to obtain honor points. That is, the wider the area of the story that I participate in, the higher the number of honor points I get, and the story of Apocalypse directly affects the entire Earth. The most important point is that although Apocalypse is powerful, Phoenix still gave it a second. Even if you beat soy sauce next to it, the honor value you get is definitely an astronomical number. So Yi-han suggested, I know what you want me to join School X, but I regret to tell you that I have my own influence and it is impossible to join School X, but I think I can join School X, work together. Then he paused and looked at Raven's expression and continued, so I promised to go to X Academy with you to talk about cooperation with Professor X. Chapter 48. The opposite Mystique nodded after hearing the silence for a while. Raven has a deep understanding of Yi-han's horror, so Raven still agrees with Yi-han's cooperation. The more important point is that now my own life is in the hands of the other party. What if I don't agree with others to kill myself? Seeing Mystique nodded in agreement, Yi-han directly opened the space portal to School X. Yi-han has been at Tony Stark's house for the past 3 days through Jarvis to learn about the location of some plots, and X learning is one of the places that Yi-han focuses on. After all, X Academy Yi-han, who claims that every episode will have problems, know this place. That's why he was able to use the remote space portal to go directly to X Academy. After all, the requirement of the space portal is to determine the detailed place where you want to go, not to open the door where you want to open the door. After opening the space portal, he beckoned to Mystique behind him, beckoning him to follow him. Then he raised his foot and stepped into the space portal, and Mystique Raven looked at the scene behind the door and found that it was indeed X Academy, and stepped in without hesitation. The reason why Raven is so cautious is that he is afraid that the other party will have bad intentions. What if he sends himself to a certain laboratory directly? Fortunately, Yi-Han obviously does not have this idea. After arriving at X Academy through the portal, Mystique Raven said unbelievably, unexpectedly, I crossed 3 cities directly in one step and came to X Academy. Surprised by Mystique Raven, Yi-Han seemed very calm. He took one step more than half of the earth, let alone 3 cities. At the same time, Yi-Han, an unexpected guest, was soon discovered by Professor X, who was being taught by mutants, and at the same time Yi-Han's mystique was discovered. Professor X smiled at the Phoenix Music Institute next to him and said, "A friend is visiting. They are now next to the fountain in the yard. You can bring them here." Phoenix Chin nodded directly after hearing Professor X's. Although her telepathy is still half-hearted and not as good as Professor X, but the most basic sense of ability is still there, so after Professor X's reminder, he also found Yi-Han and the others next to the fountain. Because Professor X often taught her not to invade other people's hearts casually, she didn't know that the unexpected visitor was Yi-Han. If he knew it, he would definitely not meet him personally. After all, he didn't know why he didn't think Yi-Han was generally upset. At this moment, Yi-Han looked at Mystique next to the fountain and asked, "Then where are we going to find Professor X now?" Mystique, who knows the whole mutant school very well, said with confidence, "No need to look for it. Just wait here." Sure enough, Raven's words fell on the other side of the piano and ran over. Then I looked at Mystique, who had been restored to its original state, in amazement. After all, Mystique at this moment is the hero of the whole mutant, so Chin was so surprised. Chin still welcomes the arrival of the mutant hero Mystique. But after seeing Yi-Han next to him, his face pulled down and asked unhappily, "Why are you coming to our school? Didn't you say not to join our school?" "Yi-Han, I feel that the treatment is quite different." But your thick-skinned Yi-Han doesn't care about Phoenix's attitude. Then shrugged his shoulders, "I am not here to join your college, but from X Academy." Phoenix Chin said with a cold face, "If that's the case, then come with me." After speaking, he started to lead the way. Soon, under the leadership of Chin, the two came to Professor X's room. Professor X still smiled reassuringly after seeing that the person was Yi-Han, and asked, "I don't know what is your responsibility for coming to our school late at night." Regarding Professor X's question, Yi-Han pointed to Mystique next to him helplessly and said, "Do you think brother wants to come? If it wasn't for being cheated by her in the middle of the night, I would have planned to come to your school." Mystique was also embarrassed to explain Yi-Han's accusation, "I wanted to fool this guy into X Academy, but he knew it. But he still promised to come to the school and talk to you about cooperation." Professor X looked at Yi-Han thoughtfully, and said for a while, "I don't know what cooperation you have with me. According to the information we have received, you are not from this world X." The reason why the professor said this is to tell Yi-Han that he already knows the origin of Yi-Han, so if he wants to fudge, then hesitate. Chapter 49. Yi-Han didn't feel too surprised that Professor X had shaken out his old bottom. After all, since Fury's dead bald head found X school, he must have prepared his own information. However, Yi-Han did not rush to say the content of the cooperation, but pulled the matter into another matter. "I don't know what Professor X thinks of mutant today." Professor X did not answer Yi-Han's question. Even Beast Hank, who was standing next to Professor X, just moved his mouth and made no sound. And because of Yi-Han's problem, the whole room fell silent. They really couldn't answer Yi-Han's question. After all, mutant is in a very embarrassing state. Say he's doing well? Now there are mutant experiment subjects in every laboratory. Say that he has a bad life, right? Don't say that he really has a bad life. After all, it is estimated that at least 70% of the entire mutant foot group are living in the strange eyes of others and even dare not expose themselves, and 10% have not been excluded due to various reasons. As for the rest? Now a small group of people are doing pretty well under the protection of Professor X. Compared to other mutants, the mutant of X school is indeed much better than the 80%. But the remaining 10% estimate which laboratory they are staying in at the moment. So for Professor X, who has been working to promote peace between mutant and mankind, he really doesn't want to answer this question, and at the same time, he has been deliberately avoiding this question. However, Yihan has already raised it, and Professor X can only answer it bitterly. Although we are in a bad state at the moment when we become humans, I think through our efforts, we can only be able to live in peace with mankind. Ha ha ha. No more, I really can't help it anymore. A row of presumptuous laughter suddenly grew in the whole room. Looking at the people who turned their eyes on him because of his laughter, Yihan said embarrassedly, "I'm sorry, I just couldn't hold back it, I laughed out loud." Even Professor X, who is a good man, couldn't help but twitch. "Is it so funny what I said?" And the piano next to him couldn't help but reprimanded, "What's a laugh? What's so funny? Do you know how much the professor paid for mutant and humans?" Yihan, who tried to hold his smile as much as possible, asked very seriously, "Now with your efforts, has mutants' situation improved? Has the number of mutants sent to various laboratories decreased? Has people's eyes on mutant changed? I really have to feel sad for you. A group of people who are living in their dreams." Yihan mocked unceremoniously. To be honest, Yihan really doesn't value X Academy. From the perspective of the audience, Professor X is indeed a great person. But from mutants' point of view, Professor X is a gangster. It's as if a fool came out to advocate peaceful coexistence between the Chinese and the Japanese during the War of Resistance against Japan. What is this, not a traitor? Seeing Professor X, who was about to refute himself, Yihan interrupted directly, "You should know that I have a super ability and can see another thing in the world. Then I'll talk to you about you on another timeline." Mutant's fate. So Yihan told the story. Do not. It should be an accident. Yihan slowly began to tell the story of the X-Men in another timeline, from the first battle of the X-Men to the point where Mutant was bought by Sentinel and annihilated the entire race. Looking at the people who couldn't believe it, Yihan said very seriously, "Don't think I'm alarmist. Professor X should know if I'm lying. And the reason I'm telling you is not to start a war between you and humans. Let you think about how you should go in the future." Professor X's face sank after hearing this, although Wolverine's stock had long been buried because of the modification of the timeline. But Professor X has telepathy's ability. So he can sense that Yihan is not lying. Seeing everyone who shook himself with a strong dose, Yihan continued to ask, "What do you think of your mutant situation now?" What Yihan was telling was a story. Professor X knew through telepathy that it was true, so Professor X didn't worry about this question anymore, but directly replied, "You should talk about the content of our cooperation. Isn't the purpose of your coming today?" Yihan. Chapter 50. At this moment, Yihan suddenly felt that his head was not enough. "Mom, I told you about cooperation, but you just wanted to reason with me. Now I want to make sense, but you came out and said you want to talk to me about cooperation." However, Yihan, who has achieved his goal, is not ready to continue spoiling, so he also talked about the content of his cooperation. The content of the cooperation with you is very simple. The first point, mutual help, that is, if you have anything you can ask me for help in the future, and I can ask you for help if I have anything. The second, business cooperation. I know you have always I am worried about the employment problem of mutant after graduation, but I can solve your problem. Professor X nodded in agreement after listening to Yihan's cooperation content. He has seen Yihan's combat effectiveness. If Yihan is the strongest ally on the ground, then their mutant will have another whole card, so from the first point of view, they have the advantage. As for the second point, Professor X also feels that they are still taking advantage. After all, he has been troubled by mutants' employment after graduation. You must know that the current society does not welcome mutant, so mutants' employment after graduation, the problem has not been effectively solved. And now Yihan is willing to help himself solve this problem, why not do it? Very satisfied with the content of the cooperation, Professor X still asked uncertainly, "After my students graduate, how do you solve their employment problems?" For Professor X's question, Yihan had already had a plan in his mind. It's very simple. Because I saved Tony Stark's life, the other party gave an island and $10 billion. And I plan to build a city on that island. And after graduating from your school, mutant can go to my island to solve employment problems. Professor X was also very satisfied with Yihan's answer, but for the safety of his students, Professor X decided to make a decision after discussing with a few more qualified X-Men. So Professor X suggested, we need to discuss the content of the cooperation you mentioned, so I want to apologize for staying here for the night. How about my reply to you tomorrow morning? Yi-han also directly agreed to Professor X's arrangement. Anyway, he was not in a hurry, and there was nothing wrong with staying at X Academy for a whole night. After seeing Yi-han agree, Professor X said to Chin, please go to a guest to arrange a dormitory. Although Chin was not very willing to Professor X's task, he coldly said to Yi-han, come with me. Then he left Yi-han with a beautiful back. Professor X looked at Chin, who had a bad attitude, and smiled apologetically at Yi-han, but Yi-han didn't care about it either. So Yi-han also walked out directly with Chin. Yi-han, who was walking behind Chin, looked at Chin's beautiful back, and couldn't help but feel why. You must know that the piano on this timeline is not the ant before the restart of the timeline. The piano in this world is much better than that ant. Seeing Chin walking in the front, Yi-han asked helplessly, I have always wanted to ask you something, where did I offend you? Why do you feel that you seem to see me starting and just look at me unpleasantly? The Chin who was walking in front heard Yi-han's question and suddenly stopped and stared at Yi-han blankly. At this moment, she also found her own problem. The other party hadn't done anything that made her very annoying, but why did she always look at the other party unpleasantly? She could only think that her second personality should be at fault. However, he guessed right. For Yi-han, an outsider, it is normal for the phoenix force in his body to see Yi-han upset. And the tangled Chin stared at Yi-han in a daze. Yi-han, who was watched by Chin, looked at the dazed Chin and shook his hand in confusion before her eyes and asked, what's the matter? I just asked you a question. And so? As for this. At this moment, I realized that I was in a bad mood, and Chin answered with a smile, I'm sorry. I just thought about things in my mind. Yi-han suddenly felt a little uncomfortable with the piano whose attitude suddenly improved. How could his attitude suddenly change so much? With such doubts, Yi-han continued to ask tentatively, can that person show me a tour of X Academy tomorrow? And Chin didn't expect to agree, well. Maybe 8:30 tomorrow morning. I will be free at that time. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you're notified of future uploads. You can find the next parts in the playlist visible on the screen or on my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.